Testing, testing, testing. All right, we're good. I should turn the camera on. There we go. That's better. Hello. Hello, everyone. How you doing? I can't hear you answer. Yeah, so here we are at the end of a long, harrowing road. It was a longer road than I think many people expected or anyone really wanted. But yeah, here we are. The Flash Season 9. The end of my relevance. So because it's the last video, I didn't want to rush anything or half-ass anything. And there actually was quite a lot to talk about, more than I found in any previous season. So, you know, strap in, grab a snack. We're going to be here a while. You know, why not hit the like button too? You know, subscribe if you want. I'm not your boss. I won't lie, episode 1 kicks off with a bang, but because it's this show, it's kind of impressive and then almost immediately dragged down when the characters start talking. The impressive part is the clear increase in production value. I mean, you can tell the budget got a slight boost right away, and the show just looks a little sharper, a little more refined. They pull off a couple of stunts that are definitely a cut above the usual person gets knocked back 5 feet on wires maneuver that gets used in most other episodes of this show. And there's a decent action sequence where every member of Team Flash gets a little hero moment. You know, it's cheesy in the right way. It's sort of a wink to the audience.
Let's do this one last time.
Okay, maybe it's a bit more than a wink. And then it turns out that this is just a dream, which was kind of obvious if you noticed the dead character. And then everyone else dies because this dream is also a premonition about a villain that threatens all of their lives.
You did the best you could.
Just wasn't good enough.
Oh good, some evil entity wants to kill all of Barry's friends. That's fresh. So, in the real world, Barry gets up and starts going about his morning with Iris. She's returning to work after her whole time sickness situation last season, which I still barely understand and honestly have no real desire to understand. Barry's acting a little weird, but aside from that, it seems like a normal day.
Just say yes.
Yes to what?
But of course, it's not. When Iris arrives at work, she learns that Supergirl's boss has offered to buy her company, Central City Citizen Media, which I never noticed until now is a real mouthful of a name. But branding aside, this acquisition is likely the first step towards Iris's impending future as a Pulitzer-winning media mogul.
All you have to do is just say yes.
And Iris should be excited, but she seems unsure, because how would Barry know this was happening? Besides the fact that he, you know, regularly time travels. There's also a brief cutaway to Cecile practicing her new telekinetic abilities with Joe and getting excited about being a more active part of the team, but he also seems unsure. And we know this because he kind of looks to the side uncomfortably, so Cecile reads his emotions and says, "What's going on?" Because that's how every single scene involving this character plays out.
What's wrong now?
Anyway, Barry goes to fight his first villain of the week, the new Captain Boomerang, who's stealing some sort of science device that you don't even need to know the name of, because there's a new one every episode. They have a little fight, Boomerang teleports away, and Barry just decides to give up.
No, we'll deal with it tomorrow. I got dinner plans with Iris.
Barry, this is obviously going to become a larger problem. This happens to you every week. See, look, the machine. It's glowing ominously. So, later that night, after those incredibly important dinner plans, Iris asks Barry how he knew the offer to buy her company was coming. And Barry answers by revealing that he has done something which can only be described as unhinged. See, Barry has assembled what he calls the map book, which essentially lays out his future with Iris beat for beat for the rest of their lives. He knows when and how her career really takes off, he knows when she becomes pregnant, and I'm guessing he also knows her time of death down to the second. Now, this plot development might make you think, what a strange thing to do, instead of, aw, how romantic. Either way, it's a very obvious shortcut to empty conflict, but it also kind of breaks time travel. Stay with me on this. So, if you know this show, you know that time travel, despite being very prevalent in the story, doesn't really have any rules per se.
See, that's the thing about time travel, Barry. The more you do it, the less the rules apply to you.
The timeline is a mess, especially when you factor in the universe getting rebooted back in season 6. So really, at this point, anything between seasons 1 and 5 may or may not have happened. But even so, just for this episode, wouldn't the presence of this book ensure that the future it promises can't exist, because being aware of the exact time that huge life events are going to unfold would influence a person's decision making around those events, right? Shouldn't Barry, of all people, know that by now? And don't worry, someone is going to very bluntly explain this to him later, but it's so glaringly obvious that I'm surprised the writers decided to go with this story as the season premiere. Because, to jump ahead a bit, the science device makes the day repeat over and over again. That's right, it's another time loop, which has been done at least twice before on this show, and funnily enough, was also used in Arrow's final season to much greater effect. You know, speaking of Arrow's final season, that's actually a very relevant point of comparison. Arrow Season 8 is basically just a prequel to Crisis on Infinite Earths, but it's still one of the most entertaining seasons of the show, in no small part because they had limited episodes and had to focus their ideas. And when the reduced episode count for Flash Season 9 was announced, I thought the writers might go in a similar direction with the structure, especially since I found out that Flash Season 8 was actually being treated like the end of the show during its production, because the showrunners weren't sure if it would get renewed. So the writers had a unique sort of freedom here, because they had a somewhat functional, or as functional as they could pull off, ending to the overarching story of the entire show, so now they had time to really dig into those characters and send them off on a high note. But then I started watching the actual Season 9, and this episode made me realize that whatever content we were going to get narratively, it was going to be the same room temperature hot dog water we've all been slurping down for at least 3 seasons. Anyway, back to the episode. Like I was saying, it's a time loop, so they go through the same scenes over and over again. It starts to get overwhelming, and they get increasingly frustrated and disconnected. You've seen Groundhog Day, you get it.
It's called Groundhog Day.
So, Team Flash does their usual problem-solving huddle, and they decide to just keep living out the day repeatedly until they can figure out how to make the science machine do good science instead of bad science. That's not verbatim dialogue, but it might as well be. And to the episode's credit, I think this sequence is pretty fun. Barry tries to solve the problem and just blows himself up 100 times. Iris gives up and starts drinking. This is the most relatable they've ever been. But good things can't last too long in this show, and soon enough, Barry and Iris engage in their 10,385th argument over nothing. That's just a rough estimate, but it's definitely true emotionally, even if it isn't true mathematically. And this time, the fight is especially pointless. Basically, Barry thinks the time loop hinges on Iris making a decision about her career, and that she's destabilizing the timeline by not following the path his book has defined. But Iris's concern is really just that she doesn't want to spend every day of her life doing what this stupid book tells her she has to do.
But don't you want our future anymore?
Yes, of course I do. I just want to be able to choose it.
I thought you already did.
Clearly, Barry doesn't know what to do, or think, or maybe even how to think, so he immediately runs to Joe and Cecile's house, and they explain the very obvious solution to the problem he created to him, like he's a child, because that's how you resolve conflict.
Because one thing this book doesn't do is tell you why things happen the way they did.
Anyway, he gets his pep talk, he goes home and apologizes to Iris for making his stupid book, and then he sets it on fire. Awesome. Okay, I'm being too negative. I do think the notion of the future being something you create with other people and not obsessively plan for based on what you think should happen or has to happen, that's a solid thematic idea to build an episode around. The execution is not great, but it's a good idea. And then Barry and Iris go through the entire day's loop working together instead of facing their problems alone. It's not deep, but hey, it's fine. It's fine, it works. But during their final encounter with Captain Boomerang, he activates a nuclear bomb inside the science device, which I guess was part of it or already in there. It doesn't matter. And that threatens to destroy the entire city, obviously.
You set off a nuclear bomb?
Yeah.
And Barry's solution is to vibrate the explosion so it passes through everyone and I guess just dissipates harmlessly? Is that how radiation works? Is that how explosions work? I don't know, and I won't pretend to. Anyway, after they survive this very improbable scenario, Chester and Allegra kiss for, I mean, it's not a short amount of time, and the music is telling me I'm supposed to find this very uplifting, but I do not. I sure hope a shocking amount of time isn't wasted on this all season long. So Barry and Iris fix the science, they escape the loop, and they explain the point of the episode again.
I got everything the book said I would, except I did it on my own terms.
That's great.
Thanks for the reminder. And Team Flash has a little get-together to talk about how they just saved the city again.
You have been through a lot in 9 years.
Yeah, thanks for the reminder. The point is, everything seems like it's back to normal until Joe reveals that he wants to leave Central City.
I think we should leave Central City.
Cecile is pretty shocked by this, but given the biannual apocalypses that happen here, I can't imagine why. Also, the actual reason is that Jesse L. Martin just didn't want to be on the show anymore, and who can blame him? But there's one more hook. Sometime later, Barry enters Star Labs to find Caitlin, only it's not quite Caitlin.
If you're not Frost or Caitlin, who are you?
That's right, new Caitlin just dropped, and she has dollar store hair streaks for some reason. You know, I sure hope a shocking amount of time isn't wasted on this Wait, did I say that already? So yeah, that's episode 1. Like I said, not an inspiring start, and I defaulted to boredom pretty quickly, but it's just the first episode. There's 13, you know, there's room for improvement, even if it's statistically very unlikely to happen. I mean, we haven't even met the main villain yet. Oh yeah, right, the main villain. Well, the first one, at least. So, Captain Boomerang goes to one of the hundreds of empty warehouses that seem to exist in this city and meets up with a shadowy speedster who looks and sounds exactly like the Reverse Flash because, let's face it, they all do at first.
The Flash is never truly alone.
And I knew who this villain was going in, but if you don't know, you'd probably be very confused when they jump at the camera and a bat symbol appears. But don't worry, it'll make sense in a few episodes. Well, it'll make enough sense. Episode 2 is not very good, but on the bright side, it's the kind of not very good that vacates your brain almost immediately after it ends, or maybe that's just me repressing it. Who's to say? So, first off, we are more formally introduced to the new consciousness inhabiting Caitlin's body, who goes by the name Snow. When Caitlin entered that machine last season to bring Frost back, it apparently turned her into a new person instead.
Snow here is a total blank slate. With 0 memories.
Honestly, this development confuses and frustrates me to a degree that few TV shows ever have. I find it baffling that the story Caitlin got this season was being killed off screen and replaced with what is essentially a child who at this point offers no help to the team and instead is just basically naive comic relief. And yeah, you heard me right. She's dead.
Caitlin's dead, Barry.
What?
That's impossible. I
And maybe her character hasn't always been the most engaging, but she's been a core presence since the pilot. I mean, nobody even reacts. Cecile is the only one who even sheds a tear, eventually. Everyone else just kind of stands around. Anyway, Chillblaine, aka Mark, explains, or explains, if you will, that they can use Caitlin's machine again to bring her back. Team Flash is skeptical, but this is not the first resurrection they've had to pull off, so they decide to go for it. But there also seems to be something else at play.
This is going even better than we planned.
So then we get a couple of scenes of people being kind of sad about Caitlin, and then immediately segueing into whatever boring drama has been heaped on their plates this week. First, it's with Chester and Allegra.
I mean, this is nuts.
Yeah, I know, right?
This scene introduces a strange editing convention that sticks around all season, these frequent blue-tinted flashbacks to things that happened 1 episode ago. I find these very annoying because they feel redundant and almost condescending. Like, did you think I would forget that kiss? It went on for half an hour. Speaking of wasting time, we then cut to Joe and Cecile, where the exact same scene plays out. Sad about Caitlin, awkward segue to what happened last episode, and...
I think we should leave Central City.
Yes, I saw the episode. Thank you. Basically, Joe is worried about Cecile being more on the front lines as a hero because he doesn't want to lose her, and this is not going to lead anywhere interesting, so get excited for that. Then, we thankfully leave Team Flash for a bit and go to a nightclub owned by Hartley Rathaway, aka the Pied Piper. If you don't recognize him, he's the guy with the Soundwave gauntlets, but also, because of how this show is written, it's safe to assume that those gauntlets can do pretty much anything. And he runs a club now, I guess. His boyfriend works security, and then he goes outside and gets attacked by a woman with a super-powered fiddle. Just a typical Friday night in Central City.
You can call me the fiddler. and I'm here to ruin your night.
Someone apparently wants Hartley dead, and during the fight with his would-be assassin, his heart rate gets knocked out of its proper rhythm, and then he uses his sound gloves to fly away to safety. Like I said, they can do anything. Meanwhile, back at Flash HQ, the debate around what to do with Snow continues. They try to use Caitlyn's machine again, but it malfunctions, and the true nature of Mark's plan is revealed.
Caitlin wasn't supposed to come back alone, Barry. They both were.
I do find it kind of strange that Barry even trusted Mark in the first place, because his defining character trait is that he always has an ulterior motive. You could argue the team was blinded by grief or something, but they shouldn't be so blinded that they forget this guy was a serial killer like a couple of years ago. Anyway, in response to being tricked by a psychopath yet again, Barry invites Mark to join the team?
You are a part of this team now.
He has to know this won't work out. Anyway, the team eventually discovers that if they can get the machine to work properly, they can only bring back either Caitlin or Frost, not both. And during this process, Snow will die. Mark's choice is obviously Frost, but he's insane, so it's not surprising that everyone else has a harder time choosing which of their friends to bring back from the dead. It's not a common problem you encounter at work. And by now, you're probably thinking, hey, is anyone gonna ask Snow what she thinks about being sacrificed? And Snow would agree with you. In a conversation with Cecile, she reveals that she's starting to enjoy life and wants to discover more.
I don't want to go back inside that metal box.
When you break it down, this whole Snow situation is so twisted. Think about it. A woman builds a machine to resurrect her dead sister, who was actually an alternate personality inside her head who was given her own human form, but when she uses the machine, it kills her and creates a new being with blue hair streaks for some reason, and the first thing this being encounters is a group of people who immediately start debating what they can achieve by killing her. Based on a rough summary of the episode, I can see how someone might call this an interesting sci-fi concept, but in execution, it's not. It's just the same flat arguments, the same nonsensical moral quandaries, and you know the resolution is going to be something besides the two options presented, because they wouldn't do all of this just to kill Snow and bring back Caitlin, right? That would be pointless. Why would they even bother? Oh yeah, Hartley's also here now. He breaks into Star Labs to stabilize his messed up heart because this building has zero security measures, and Snow ends up talking to him about his issues.
No, then you can't help me. And therefore, you are useless.
You know, moments like that made me realize that this show has really been missing that kind of anti-hero presence. I can't remember the last time a character brought such a dismissive energy to the dynamic since Captain Cold was still around, and I like that energy. It breaks up the monotony, because every member of Team Flash just sounds the same after a while, and they rarely interact with someone who isn't absolutely good or absolutely evil. The moments where Hartley gets to play off the team are kind of fun, because they're annoyed by him but not actively working against him.
That's 2 new rogues in 2 days, and now Mark is lying to us too.
Oh, trouble in paradise?
Don't worry about it.
Anyway, as these stories converge, Team Flash votes on which version of Caitlin to bring back, and Chester's logic is simply astounding.
Resurrecting the dead is unnatural. I choose Caitlin, because when I run through the science, it's what makes the most sense to me.
Ah yes, the science. Let me just run the numbers on bringing my friend back from the dead. I think that line actually very neatly sums up how this show views the concept of science. It's not a field or a process or a perspective. It's just a general noun to be used whenever the characters need shorthand justification for anything, or if the writers do.
I wish I'd never been born.
But as this debate is going down, Hartley goes back to his club, where the Fiddler is waiting. And yes, this villain's actual name is the Fiddler, and she's not even the first Fiddler who's been on this show, but we don't have time for that right now. So the Fiddler quickly dispatches Hartley's security, and soon does the same with his boyfriend, which pretty quickly undoes Hartley's self-improvement. But Barry shows up to help, and of course remind him that he's really a good guy, so a fight ensues, and it turns out that all of Hartley's loved ones aren't dead. They're just trapped in a different vibrational frequency dimension or something, I don't know, science. By using his sound wave abilities, Hartley is able to free them, and wouldn't you know it, by using his gauntlets for love, Hartley fixes his heart.
You made the right choice.
And reset things in the process.
I know writers who use subtext and they're all cowards.
So, just when it seems like everything has been resolved, a flashbang boomerang hits the room. That's right, these two villains are working together, and when they're gone, they've taken Hartley's gauntlets with them. That was the real target all along. Later, back at Star Labs, Mark is very eager to kill this woman and bring his girlfriend back, but Snow reveals to everyone that she's decided to live her own life. She even chooses a new name, Keone, after the Greek goddess of snow. And Mark reacts like any normal person would.
You need to get inside right now.
But before he can do anything, Hartley appears and destroys the machine, effectively ending any chance of bringing Caitlin or Frost back. This is supposed to be a victorious moment, but I found myself feeling something more like dread as I realized this character was going to be sticking around all season. Then Mark threatens to kill Hartley and stomps out of the lab, and at this point, I feel like his membership to Team Flash should be revoked, since, you know, he's clearly unstable and has betrayed them multiple times and now has motivation to betray them all again. But it wouldn't be the Flash if characters did things that made sense, now would it? And as this conflict resolves, the rain that's been falling all episode finally clears. The sun comes out, bathing our heroes in warm light. You might think this is just more heavy-handed symbolism, but it's actually far stupider. So, the final scene with our heroes shows them all out dancing at Hartley's club, and it's a pretty fun way to end the episode. I like when we get to see these characters do normal things and act like friends. It's refreshing. They even show some bloopers from this sequence in the end credits, which is weird because this is the one and only episode where they do that.
Nobody else has these moves.
That's not...
But back at the evil warehouse, the new villains are using Hartley's gauntlets. What did I just say? Hartley's gauntlets to do something? I guess to free this mysterious speedster from a vibrational dimension like the one Hartley's security was stuck in? Anyway, this speedster reveals themselves as Red Death, with a costume that looks simultaneously good and terrible. I don't know how to justify that opinion. I feel like every time I see it, I feel the opposite extreme.
Central City, the Flash disgraced me.
And like every other speedster villain before them, they want to kill Barry and destroy the city. And I'm sure they'll accomplish that goal just like all the other ones did. So yeah, overall, not a great episode. It has moments that are slightly above par, but I would never call it enjoyable. You know, when I was first watching season 9, I didn't want to write it off too quickly, but I've seen it a few times now, and it only ever gets slightly better than this. On the bright side, it definitely gets funnier, so at least I can laugh to cover up the tears. Okay, episode 3. It's not good. That's going to be a common theme. So the last couple of episodes threw a lot of weird balls in the air, but now we start to get a sense of what's actually going on. Basically, this new team of rogues is robbing different tech companies to put together a cosmic treadmill, a device that can manipulate time.
Which is a lot of power in the wrong hands.
There have been treadmills like this scattered across the show, and presumably Red Death wants their own so they can execute some sort of evil time plan, because these speedsters always have some sort of evil time plan. Except for Mina Dalwin last season, she was cool, and if you thought she might turn up again, you'd be wrong. There's also another meta with the rogues, Amar, a character who everyone acts like they know but has actually never appeared on this show before. She's a new version of a character who was previously a villain on Arrow, so I guess this is something else that changed after Crisis, but who cares? Her deal is that she's mute and has a big knife. That's about it. So, as Barry realizes that the future of his timeline might be in the hands of these annoying freaks, he goes to Hartley for help. Hartley offers a solution that kind of makes sense, which is to form their own team to steal the final piece of the treadmill before the rogues can. So Barry and Hartley go around the city and put together a new squad. A suicide squad, if you will, but not the good kind. The first meta they recruit is Jocko Birch. I'm sure you all remember fan favorite character Jocko Birch.
And you probably don't remember me.
No, of course I do.
Anyway, he agrees to join them because doing a heist sure beats customer service, and the next recruit is, are you kidding me?
You want me to help you break into a high-tech facility.
Yes, let's ask the drunk guy who hates us for help. I'm sure there's no way this can backfire. So Mark agrees to join them for whatever reason. I guess he just loves stealing stuff, and so does the next recruit, a crime boss who has tried to kill Barry in and out of costume multiple times, Goldface.
Who's the new sidekick?
I'm nobody's sidekick. I'm the Pied Piper.
Once again, I must ask, Are you kidding me? How could you place any level of trust in this guy? But I do want to highlight Damien Poitier here because I think he consistently does a really good job. He's a really fun presence. He always seems like he's having a great time.
You squealed on Aminette? I thought she was your soulmate.
True love is a lie.
So, with this new squad assembled, the plan is underway. The piece of tech everyone is after is locked in a safe surrounded by metahuman power dampeners, which are kept running by 4 separate generators that require 4 different methods of power manipulation to knock out. And I do think this is a solid concept in theory. Like, it almost feels like clever writing to have a lock and a key be tied in so closely with the characters and their abilities. But this challenge is completely arbitrary. The generator's weakness could have been anything. Anyone's powers could have worked here. It's such a generic obstacle. And of course, the group immediately starts infighting because none of them like each other or Barry or have any reason to be there besides the money on the table for fencing the tech. So again, it seems like almost anyone on the planet would be better suited for this mission.
I'm just a bunch of criminals to him.
It's pretty funny that the episode treats this falling out like a personal failure on Barry's part because everyone turns on him so quickly. I mean, his distrust seems kind of justified, right? Also, if you need a metahuman to blast some generic rays at a lock, why not get Allegra to help? She still has powers, right? That's a real question, I don't know. Speaking of Allegra, she doesn't do much this episode. She and Chester just spend the whole runtime awkwardly avoiding each other because I honestly have no idea why. I guess because if they had a single adult conversation, they'd have nothing else to do all season. Instead, we get Keown talking to them about their feelings. Great.
Do I make you uncomfortable?
The episode feels pretty half-baked. Actually, most stories this season feel like they only have enough meat for like half an episode, and it's all just stretched out to hit 40 minutes, especially with those stupid flashbacks. And with only 13 episodes to work with rather than the usual 20 to 25 or whatever, it's really odd. And on that note, I also don't know why the writers decided to break up the season structurally the same way that seasons 6, 7, and 8 were broken up, because there's obviously not as much time to kill. Why not just tell one story instead of forcing 2 or 3 together with barely enough time to tell any of them? Because, spoiler alert, I guess, this whole Red Death storyline is going to be wrapped up in 2 more episodes, and it's barely started. I know it's ironic to complain about this show moving too fast, but that's not the problem. It's like this season is missing pieces. Also, if you're curious about Red Death in general, I've done hours of painstaking research into this character, and by that I mean I read a comic wiki for like 10 minutes, so here's a quick catch-up. Originally, this character was a version of Bruce Wayne from a story where a team of evil Batmen are unleashed from the dark multiverse, which is like the multiverse but exists underneath it somehow, and this is why I don't read superhero comics anymore. But yeah, there's a Doomsday Batman, an Aquaman Batman, and Red Death is the Flash Batman. It's actually not just Bruce Wayne either, it's Bruce and Barry Allen fused together with both of their consciousnesses fighting inside his head, their head, but none of this factors into the show at all, which is kind of a shame. Anyway, after his squad falls apart, Barry does his usual moping routine with Iris, who's also feeling overwhelmed by her impending pregnancy. They have a nice and actually kind of resonant conversation about what having a child means for them and how much time they'll have for themselves and each other once she arrives. It's a solid scene. You believe the conflict, it feels very human and vulnerable, and then it's ruined when Iris suddenly starts explaining how this situation is just like Barry and his new team, even though it has nothing to do with them.
Maybe we're not the only ones who need the freedom to follow our own paths.
It's so clumsy. You can pinpoint the exact second where the episode remembers that scenes should connect. So Barry changes his mind about the squad and shows up at whatever lab this is to back them up. He also sort of reveals that he's the Flash, the worst kept secret in the world.
Barry Allen's the Flash.
And just like that, the heist is back on. The squad goes inside, they split up, they find their targets, and in maybe the funniest moment of the entire show, it's revealed that everyone except Barry brought a change of clothes with them so they could wear their supervillain outfits during the heist. I have no idea what the thought process was here. Very inconspicuous, Mark. Well done, you blend right in. So everyone points their hands at the generators and sort of generically exerts, because that's how most superpowers look on this show, and Barry gets the tech. But suddenly, the power comes back on. Barry can't speed away. Something must have gone wrong. But surely, it couldn't be.
Sorry, not sorry, Barry.
I, for one, am shocked. So yeah, it turns out that Mark had already been recruited by Red Death before Barry came to find him, and the rest of the rogues emerged to face off against the squad. It's now an all-out rogues versus rogues battle, and by that I mean a few underwhelming fight scenes in empty rooms punctuated by bad comedy and awkward stunts. To be fair, there are a couple of moments with some personality, like when Jocko and the Fiddler start flirting about bands they like, but again, bad comedy.
I like your jacket.
I like your hair.
There's also a brief exchange where Hartley and Amar do some mid-fight confrontational dialogue in sign language, which is a nice touch. So the fight goes on for a bit, then everyone goes outside, and just when it looks like both teams will face off together, Red Death interrupts to reveal themselves to Barry, disabling his speed and escaping with the tech and their minions. Team Flash is disturbed, but overall not surprised by another evil speedster showing up, because this is, like, the 19th one they've had to deal with, but the bat symbol is new. Chester also reports that his analysis of the rogues' new weaponry revealed that they were made from advanced tech out of Wayne Enterprises. Seems like an odd coincidence. Back over at the evil warehouse, Mark still isn't wearing a shirt and demands to know who he's really working for. And Red Death takes off their mask to reveal it's as close to Bruce Wayne as the show can legally get. If you don't know, and I wouldn't be shocked if you didn't, this is Batwoman. Well, the second Batwoman, and that show was canceled a year before Flash Season 9 aired, so if your first reaction to this big reveal was to say, "Who's that?" I wouldn't blame you. You're actually lucky not to know. I wish I hadn't spent a good chunk of high school turning my brain into an Arrowverse encyclopedia. I could have been a doctor. So yeah, that's episode 3. I'm already running out of things to say at the end of these segments besides that was bad, but it's also hard to say much else about episodes like these. Thankfully, I won't have to pretend the Red Death story is going anywhere for much longer, and things start to get real wacky after that. But for now, we're here, and our villain is basically knockoff Savitar. Awesome. Alright, episode 4. No preamble, let's just get into it. So we open in the evil warehouse where Mark is putting the finishing touches on the cosmic treadmill. How this cryogenic engineer learned to build a time machine, I don't know. But on this show, anyone who's supposed to be good with technology is essentially a wizard.
How long until it's finished?
It's gonna take a lot longer than it would otherwise if you keep interrupting me.
Over in their loft, Barry and Iris discuss the Red Death situation, and Barry theorizes that she must be the new avatar of the Negative Speed Force, because, as those irritating flashbacks remind us, there have been a few of those so far. And Barry believes that whoever's under the mask can still be saved, because that's his whole thing. This isn't what motivates Red Death, that's a whole other can of worms, but it actually is foreshadowing for what happens at the end of the season. And if you don't know what's coming, I promise you'll never guess. Then we return to Joe and Cecile, who are somehow still having the exact same argument. We also see their daughter, Jenna, in person, which is an incredibly rare thing to experience on this show. I'm still surprised this kid is actually real. I thought she was a running joke.
You're talking to a realtor?
I know. I'm sorry.
Joe has apparently been looking at real estate options outside the city behind Cecile's back, and I just don't get this storyline at all. I mean, it's obvious that Cecile is not going anywhere because she somehow gets more screen time than The Flash on the show called The Flash, and I understand Joe's general concern, but most of his loved ones have died at least once and been fine, so why worry? Well, we already know the real answer, but surely there was a less contrived way to get Joe out of the picture. Meanwhile, in the next step of her plan, Red Death emerges in public to draw Barry out. He runs up to this new threat with no plan besides the vague hope that he might be able to talk her out of being evil, and you would think by now he would know this approach doesn't work on speedsters. So yeah, he lets the murderous psychopath give a long speech, which culminates in her springing the trap she had planned all along, which Barry just kind of lets happen to him.
You seem terrified.
Just a reminder, this is the 9th year that a man with super speed has been fighting superpowered criminals, and when a villain whose powers work based on eye contact walks into view, Barry just stands still and looks him in the eyes. Sometimes I wonder how he's still alive. And then Red Death claps her hands and all the power in the city just goes out. Like most things speedsters do with their magic lightning, you just have to roll with it. Team Flash tries to deal with the blackout, but they can't track Barry and all of their equipment is useless. Keown suggests that they bring in Barry's rogue team for backup, and even though she's only been conscious for a few weeks, it's a solid idea.
When the liquid droplets and the ice crystals collide, they become static electricity. Okay.
But once the squad arrives, they find themselves just as stumped. Wherever Barry is, his powers are being blocked somehow. Barry is, of course, in the evil warehouse with a power dampening cuff on and locked up in what seems like an intentionally degrading pose. The rogues all stand around and make fun of him, and I appreciate that they do sign language to keep Amar involved in the roasting. They seem like good co-workers. It's a very nice, accepting work environment. Then Mark shows up to join the party, and soon Red Death does as well. All Barry can do is try to get through to her while his team scrambles to track him down. Back at the Allen loft, Iris is sitting in the dark when she hears a knock at the door, and wouldn't you know it, it's Batwoman. Well, I think we all know who it really is. Oh yeah, and her real name is Ryan Wilder. I didn't mention that before. So Ryan pretends to be the Batwoman of this universe for a bit, but once that charade falls apart, she tells Iris that she comes from a timeline where the Flash is evil, and she created an artificial speed force to fight against him and her own rogues, since her world had no Batman. She says that she barely managed to escape that timeline with her life because the Flash had unleashed all of her villains against her, so she came to this reality to bring back Iris so she could help talk down this other Flash because, of course,
your Flash is lightning rod in every timeline.
But aside from that line, I think this whole sequence with Iris and Ryan is really good, because Iris, at her core, is supposed to be a very sharp, analytical character, and the show rarely leans into that when she gets involved in the action. She usually just, grabs a gun and never fires it. But here, as Ryan rattles off a cover story about getting to Central City and helping to fight Red Death, you can see that Iris never quite believes it. There are a lot of small looks and subtle touches that show how Iris is poking holes in Ryan's story, and when the confrontation turns more direct and she lists them all off, none of them feel like she's doing some magical BBC Sherlock 5D chess thinking. She's just acting with an appropriate level of suspicion given what happens to her, every week.
Or are you using me as bait to bring your Flash out?
I am trying to protect my city.
You don't want peace.
This sequence is intercut with Barry talking to Red Death. Well, technically it's just Red Death's suit, which allows for this hilarious visual, but because he incorrectly thinks that she's the new Negative Speed Force avatar, his arguments don't really land. And I get why Barry thinks this, but at this point, he should know that his first theory about a villain is never correct. And if I can just go on a tangent for a second, I really don't understand how this whole Speed Force avatar thing actually works. Barry is the avatar of the Speed Force, even though the actual Speed Force is dead. And then during Season 7, we met the other forces, all of which got entangled with regular human beings. So they never really had avatars, but every time we've seen them since, those forces have appeared in the forms of those humans, which is not the same thing as having an avatar, I think. Because the Speed Force had its own form, it didn't just possess Barry. And then, in Season 8, the negative counterparts of these other forces were introduced, but they all had the exact same form as their counterparts, and they also didn't have avatars. Except for the Negative Speed Force, its avatar was the Reverse Flash, but you never see that force in any other form than a crystal, but the Speed Force was always Barry's dead mom, so, how does this work? Either way, Red Death is not involved in any of that. Like I said, she just created her own artificial speed, but apparently only natural speed can power a cosmic treadmill. So overall, Red Death wants to force Barry to power the treadmill by threatening Iris, so she can bring Iris to her own timeline and use her to lure out the other, not evil version of the Flash and kill him. That's the evil time plan. Also, Ryan appears to be controlling the suit remotely, but it can't be motion controlled because there's no way she was walking around the loft doing all of these very animated movements in front of Iris, right? Anyway, in between these long exposition dumps, Barry also tries to reconnect with Mark for reasons that are beyond me.
People make mistakes.
I don't want to keep reiterating the same point here, even though the show seems fine with doing that, but why? Why is Barry still trying to save this guy? At some point, you've got to cut your losses. On the other hand, he can be pretty inflexible when it comes to saving people. I mean, he tried to save Eobard Thawne right up until he imploded, even though that guy killed his mom a couple of times and almost destroyed all of reality a couple other times. So I guess Barry trying to help his dead friend's ex isn't too far-fetched. But Mark is such a silly character that putting so much dramatic weight on his second or third or maybe fourth redemption just doesn't work.
Now I'm just another dirtbag who double-crossed you, aren't I?
Mark!
Anyway, Red Death puts her plan into action, and the episode very quickly adopts the usual season finale structure. Evil speedster, Iris in danger, lightning storm that might destroy the city. It's all pretty standard. It's nice that Cecile gets her own hero moment in the suburbs, but it also would have been cool to see her do something outside of this room. Yeah, let's just hold on Joe staring out the window while the interesting stuff happens off screen. Very cool. This scene also helps turn Joe around on the idea of Cecile being on the front lines, because now he can see how helpful she can be as a hero, but she's been doing stuff like this for years. I still don't get how this is just now becoming a concern. Whatever, the point is that Red Death's plan is just about to succeed, but in a shocking twist, Mark betrays her too, overloading the machine and overloading his boss with Speed Force energy. Barry's abilities are drained, so he can't run away, and the rogues quickly come in to stop the heroes from escaping. But it turns out that Mark can pretty effectively take on the entire enemy team with his bare hands and a piece of scrap metal, which doesn't do much to make them feel like a threat, and then the rest of Team Flash teleports in to save the day. But time is tight, and Barry's rogues obviously decide to save Barry rather than the guy who just betrayed them. They teleport away just as Mark is knocked to the ground and apparently killed, but you don't actually see him die, so it's pretty obvious that despite what the show is going to tell you, Mark is fine. Then again, knowing this show, even if you had seen him die, he would still come back at the drop of a hat. So then everyone starts arguing again, and none of it is going to change anything or lead anywhere, and that's the hallmark of good drama.
I do not like you.
So what?
Also, Allegra tries to have the conversation with Chester that they've been putting off for the whole season, and this time Chester brushes her off for no reason besides prolonging this agony even further. Again, I don't want to repeat myself, but the show keeps putting the same scenes in front of me, so I'm not sure what else to do.
We still barely have any power, and not with Mark.
Has Chester ever even had a real conversation with Mark? Why does he seem more upset that Mark's dead than anyone did about Caitlin? Either way, the one thing the team can agree on is that since Barry ruined her plan, Red Death probably hates this Flash as much as her own, and now she'll be gunning for all of them. Back at the evil warehouse, Red Death confirms this theory and promises to conquer this new world since she can't return to her own. So she's now become knockoff Zoom. And look, I don't like to pick on actors, especially on shows like this where they can only do so much with the material they're given, but Javicia Leslie does not make for a very convincing villain. I haven't seen the Batwoman show, so maybe she's a better fit for the actual Ryan Wilder, but her portrayal of intimidation and instability as Red Death is just not there.
I am vengeance.
It's rough, and it really drags down what little interest this character is able to generate.
We will bring the war to hell!
So yeah, that's episode 4. Again, I don't really know what to say here, because this is another episode where it feels like everything is supposed to be extremely important, but it's also indistinguishable from the filler. And next episode, we'll see how this whole Red Death situation resolves itself. Personally, I really hope it's because of the power of friendship or something entirely random. And maybe, if we're lucky, it'll be both. Okay, episode 5. Let's wrap this crap up. So, Red Death and her team of rogues are unleashing a full assault on the city. The Red Lightning Storm continues, the villains invade and empty out the police headquarters. Wait, what? Where did she put them? Why don't they come back? Whatever. Over at Star Labs, Team Flash is still divided over what happened to Mark, and of course, they continue to bicker about it.
This whole situation's a dumpster fire.
So, to track down Red Death, the team straps Cecile into a big machine that amplifies her empathic abilities, because Red Death is really angry and they'll be able to track that, I guess. And while she's following this evil anger signal, she also picks up another person in extreme pain. Turns out, Mark is still alive. Who knew? Naturally, Barry decides that he has to save Mark, his oldest and most trustworthy friend, so he talks to his squad about a rescue mission. Since they all just risked their lives to save Barry after Mark turned on them, it's a bit of a tough sell. But luckily, Keone is there to talk these people who barely know her into risking their lives again. It's so weird to see these very experienced heroes and villains blindly follow the viewpoint of what is essentially a newborn.
You're literally a few weeks old.
I'm just saying, maybe this is not the person who should be making calls about life-threatening missions. Anyway, back at CCPD headquarters, Red Death continues with her backup evil plan, which involves hacking the police network and transmitting a psychic signal through a big dish across the entire city, making it seem as if thousands of copies of her are appearing everywhere to stop every crime forever.
I will be the judge, jury, and executioner.
Sure. Meanwhile, Team Flash launches their rescue. They all get inside the evil warehouse and find Mark, but unfortunately, this whole situation was also a trap, which nobody seemed to even consider. Red Death attacks again and drains the rest of Barry's speed, and if you're wondering how Barry fell for the exact same trick twice in 24 hours, your guess is as good as mine. I don't think he even has object permanence by now. Then, Red Death explains how her whole clone plan works. Apparently, with a strong enough psychic signal, manifestations of the mind can be indistinguishable from reality. She uses an example from Season 7 to prove this point.
When Bashir put Savitar in your mind to stab you in the chest, did that hurt?
I want to give the show credit here because following up on weird concepts like this is what I like to see, but my question is, how does she know this happened? No, seriously, she's from another reality and she's referencing something that happened inside Barry's head. Where did she get this information? Also, it turns out the psychic power source she's working with is Grodd. Apparently, after Crisis, the city of sentient gorillas, I don't have time to explain, but there was a city of sentient gorillas, just disappeared and Grodd was left alone, feeling betrayed and abandoned. Red Death presents this as some sort of argument about how Barry's ways always fail in one of her many rants about how heroes are bad or whatever, and it's just such an unimaginative motivation. She doesn't provide a real counterpoint to anything Barry embodies, even though the show keeps insisting that she does.
I'm gonna do what you should have done in the first place.
When the team returns to Star Labs, Barry's rogues are unsurprisingly no longer cool with following his orders, and they decide to spend what appears to be the end of the world with their loved ones. And I can't blame them. Barry's incompetence has been at an all-time high lately. Over in the med lab, Keone is watching over a still unconscious Mark, trying to find a way to wake him up. She feels frustrated because she can't help the team like Caitlin or Frost could, but Iris reassures her that she'll find her place soon enough. And Keone decides that her place is kissing Mark to bring him back to life, like he's a Disney princess. Actually, I guess he is kind of like Elsa. I don't love this moment for a variety of reasons, but the main one is, you know...
You're literally a few weeks old.
Meanwhile, Barry continues to mope around because even he can see that he's being more useless than usual, but that's nothing a quick pep talk from Joe can't fix, because that's how every personal problem that Barry's ever encountered on this show has been solved, aside from the times where he had to run faster, of course. I know I've harped on about Barry's apparent memory problems a lot so far, but it's really hard to get invested in these characters when they seem to be mentally frozen in amber.
Joe, how'd we get here?
How did we... Barry, this happens to you every year, usually more than once. How did you not see this coming? You had a book that told you what was going to happen in the future. There was a whole episode about it. The Pulitzer that Iris wins is for the article she writes about this situation. What are you talking about? Whatever. The point is that Barry gets his groove back, he goes to find Grodd, and he resolves their conflict by, of course, talking the gorilla into being a good guy. Back in Central City, the Red Death clones are hunting down criminals and blasting them with lightning eyes. Okay, but suddenly the psychic wave shuts down. Red Death's plans are foiled once again. You know, it's a real shame this character was so wasted because I feel like there was such a good opportunity here to present Barry with some sort of twisted version of his own perspective on heroism that he could reflect on, maybe even learn something from, but nothing makes Red Death stand out any more than her minions do, or any villain of the week ever has. So, Barry returns with his speed intact, and he engages in yet another speedster chase/fight through the city, and to the episode's credit, this is is not quite as generic as I expected. There's more to the high-speed combat than we usually see. There's some creative moments if you don't think too hard about how lightning works. This sequence is not the problem. But soon, Red Death overpowers Barry once again, then his rogues show up to help, but they all get knocked down as well. And just when it looks like all hope is lost, the real Ryan Wilder joins the fight, disabling Red Death's speed and facing off with her hand-to-hand. The fight is pretty unremarkable, and soon enough Red Death is taken apart and knocked out. So, it turns out the key to defeating this villain was waiting for a character from a cancelled TV show to appear out of nowhere and punch her in the face. Cool. So then the heroes do their usual post-villain defeat hangout where they trade awkward compliments and offer very sudden resolutions to whatever issues they're having. And don't worry about what happened with Red Death, she's never gonna be relevant again. Barry reveals how he got his speed back, because apparently all the way back in Season 6, when he teamed up with Grodd and melded their minds to help defeat the psychic manifestation of Grodd's gorilla rival. Okay, this part might need some explanation. Basically, Barry was able to transfer some speed force into Grodd to help him win a fight that was happening inside his head, and apparently part of that speed has stayed in Grodd's brain all this time, and Barry was able to tap into that somehow. And I want to complain about how dumb this sounds, but technically speaking, the speed force isn't real, so I can't say this couldn't happen. But that will also never be relevant again, and really the only thing related to Grodd that matters at all is this one clip from Legends of Tomorrow.
Barack Obama, it will almost be an honor to kill you.
Maybe these shows are good. Anyway, Joe and Cecile also figure out their housing debate. Joe pitches the idea of moving out to the country with Jenna, while Cecile lives in the city and comes to visit on weekends so they can have dedicated time to focus on their family. That's the big solution, just buy another house. So yes, it turns out that this is also Joe's goodbye episode. He's going to sort of leave the show now. I mean, he'll be back, but it'll be a glorified cameo from here on out. And I just find this all so dumb. The way the whole Joe situation was handled just breaks through the artifice of the show for me, and makes it feel like most of this season was written according to the actors' schedules rather than what a good story might be. Anyway, Barry and Mark reconnect, and Chester and Allegra kiss in front of everyone, so I guess that's how that conflict ends. Seems like 5 episodes was a bit long to stretch out what could have been accomplished in 20 seconds, but hey, there's a lot of that going around. Oh yeah, also this.
You're pregnant.
And once again, everyone just believes her. Nobody questions this. Sure, why not? Either way, that's the end of this season's first chapter, or graphic novel if we want to follow the official lingo. This graphic novel, I hate calling it that, was called Rogue War, but it felt more like a rogue skirmish at best. The next one is just called Interlude 4, and appropriately, all 4 of the episodes grouped under it are filler that would change absolutely nothing about the final events of the story if they were removed entirely, because I guess there's no other way to structure a season of this show than to make a third of it a complete waste of my time. Even the Flash movie felt more purposeful than this, and the whole point of that was to make Man of Steel even worse and then exile Ezra Miller to a timeline where they couldn't do any more damage.
I'm leaving!
Although, the Flash movie is very interesting as a companion piece to this show, because it hits a lot of the same beats from the first few seasons and has a lot of the same pitfalls. And because these two Flashes had met before, I thought it would be fun to work a semi-review of the movie into this video somehow. So what you're about to see is footage that I shot right after I got home from the theater on opening night. I did not feel the need to dig any deeper than that in terms of criticism, because this movie left the public consciousness and my own after about 3 days and will likely never enter it again.
What it is, it's a hot mess.
Alright, it is June 16th, 2023. It is 1:16 in the morning, and I am back from seeing The Flash.
It's my face. You stole my face.
It's a mixed bag. I don't think this movie is good, but I would also not call it bad. And thankfully, for the most part, it is actually a story about the Flash. My biggest fear was that this would just be the Michael Keaton show and just be Batman 3 and look, he's back. It's Michael Keaton, look.
Yeah.
This movie actually reminded me a lot of the 2017 cut of Justice League, where it felt like two different movies that didn't quite mix. Like, on one hand, you've got the actual emotional core of the story with Barry's character, his choices, his trauma, his fear, and his ultimate decision to be better and be a better hero. And then you've got this weird hodgepodge of references and fan service, most of which just... Okay, I have to talk about the visuals. This is the worst looking movie I have maybe ever seen in a theater. It just doesn't look right the entire time. You're just looking at it like, that's not what a person looks like. That's just not correct. I don't blame the movie for looking wonky like that. It does feel kind of rushed and slapped together at the last minute, which, given how much development hell it went through, it very likely was. Even the way all the fan service is delivered in the big multiverse scene does feel very disconnected and awkward and very poorly rendered. Okay, enough complaining about the CGI, but I do want to stress, yikes. No! I think where I've landed on this movie is that I wanted to like it more than I did. It's just kind of fine, you know? It's okay at everything, and so it excels at nothing. Like, would I recommend this to someone? I don't know, because so much of it is incoherent if you haven't been following the DC movies that have been made and also haven't been made. But yeah, I had fun. I had a good time. I enjoyed it. I'm glad I enjoyed it, and I'm just going to enjoy enjoying it for now, because I feel like the more I think about this movie, the less I'll enjoy it. And I also just want to go to bed. I'm really tired. Oh my god, I have work in the morning. Alright, episode 6. This one is really not great. So we open on a voiceover montage, not from Barry or any of the main characters, but from Becky Sharp, also known as Lady Luck. Now, even if you're pretty into this show, you might not remember Becky because she hasn't appeared on screen since season 4. She was one of the metahumans that Clifford DeVoe created and absorbed, and as her name implies, she has good luck powers, which is great for this show because the concept of good luck is hard to literalize, so her abilities pretty much work however the scene she's currently in needs them to. And if you're wondering how Becky's even here, even though she died 5 seasons ago, well...
When Crisis reset the world, Becky got lucky.
So I guess her good luck is more powerful than the destruction and recreation of the entire multiverse. Maybe get Becky on Team Flash, right? Wait, actually, why isn't she on Team Flash and Chillblaine is? Becky could have taken out Red Death in like 5 seconds, I'm just saying. The answer is probably just the actor's availability again, but this show also has a general problem with dropping godlike characters into mundane little adventures like this, and then we all have to pretend they don't exist as soon as they're off screen, even though they could easily solve any of the problems that Barry encounters. But I'm not mad to see Becky again. I don't really have any strong feelings about this character one way or the other. Although it is fun that she's played by Sugar Lynn Beard, the former host of YTV's The Zone. Anyone else out there still thinking about The Zone? Anyway, the basic setup for this episode is that Becky's life was going really well. She even met the love of her life, Dom. But as soon as they got engaged, her powers started reversing, and her luck got worse and worse and worse until she was arrested for her fiancé's attempted murder, which is textbook bad luck.
I need a lawyer. You think?
And since there's only one metahuman lawyer in town, somehow, Cecile is on the case. This episode is primarily a showcase for the female side characters, a concept that I like and I think fits the final season in the spirit of spotlighting unique dynamics on the show. But also, this is a great chance to give Iris some time to shine, especially after that whole scene where she was worried about not being able to live her own life fully after having a child, so now she could be pregnant, have an adventure, and, you know, resolve that idea or acknowledge it again in any way. But instead, and this is the part I cannot make sense of, Barry and Iris just leave. They're gone for the whole episode. Yeah, they're still doing filler episodes without the protagonist in the final shortened season. And I know this episode in particular is not about Barry, and it doesn't have to be, but I think he's the only character on the current cast who actually shared scenes with Becky before this, so it might have been nice to have them reunite. But no, this episode is about Cecile. Hooray! And like pretty much every episode about Cecile, she's having a tough time because she can't balance work and family, so she doesn't believe in herself, and then she uses her powers to solve one problem, and then she does believe in herself. This time, her issue is that she has to catch a train out of town for Jenna's birthday, but she keeps getting distracted and delayed by Becky's case. And don't worry, the episode makes sure you are very aware of that ticking clock.
No, I am not gonna miss my train. It's at 8 o'clock. I'm gonna be there. I will see you tonight.
So aren't you supposed to be on a train in like 6 hours?
Yes, I am. So we need to make this fast.
What am I gonna do, Allegra? I've got less than 2 hours to make this train. Hang on, I'm sorry.
So if your first thought after hearing all that was, I bet she's going to miss the train, congratulations on your functional brain.
It's 8:07. I missed my train.
I don't really need to go through this episode point by point because it's entirely inconsequential, but the gist of it is that Cecile, Allegra, and Becky are trying to figure out who really attacked Dom. It's a pretty generic mystery, although I do like how Becky's inverted luck powers make everything more difficult at every step. It's kind of a funny problem to work around. It's fine, but there's no emotional core to the story or any real through line. Luck has nothing to do with Cecile's problems, and it's impossible to buy into said problems because her character isn't allowed to be anything less than perfect, so it never feels like missing the train will change anything. And by now, Allegra is essentially just a puppy that follows Team Flash around, so there's nothing there either.
Allegra, stay.
So, as the team chases down leads, they learn from Dom's brother, Tony, that Dom had apparently racked up a large amount of gambling debt, and generic henchmen keep showing up and trying to drag Becky away, so there's clearly something shady going on here. And to jump ahead a bit and save you roughly 20 minutes of waffling, it turns out the person behind all of this was actually Tony, the only new character who gets a name and who's conscious, so that was a little predictable.
That's bad luck for the house. But good luck for me.
Turns out, Tony is the one with the gambling debt, he was the one who attacked Dom, and after hiding a device in Becky's engagement ring that reversed her powers, he planned to kidnap her and use her inverted luck to make him win a bunch of money at a poker tournament. And I think through all 9 seasons of this show, through every twist and turn, this is the development that makes the least sense to me. So, Tony's master scheme is to force Becky to be a dealer at this poker tournament, because if she's the dealer, it would be bad luck for her if he wins. It's like a technicality thing. So he's winning over and over again, or however blackjack works, but she's not actually a dealer. She's there at gunpoint, so luck isn't really a factor here, right? And sure, I guess it's technically bad luck for Becky either way if Tony wins, because he put her fiancé in a coma, but why even do that? Not just because it's his brother, but why create this elaborate scheme to trick Becky and reverse her powers when you could just stay on her good side? Like, if you're this woman's brother-in-law and you ask her for a loan, she'll probably just find a winning lottery ticket the next day or something. Also, how has this power reversing device never come up before? They say Tony bought it off the black market, so you're telling me that tech is just floating around and Barry has done nothing to address it? Okay, we can't keep going down this hole, it's never gonna end. So yeah, in the big climactic face-off, even though Becky's still wearing the ring, Cecile is able to use her telekinesis to remove it with no bad luck, and then Becky turns back into a god and just takes out everyone in the bar without lifting a finger, which is very interesting.
I would say that we are 3 badass bitches.
Sure. And then later on, the big emotional resolution is that Cecile invites Allegra to live with her, because I guess that's easier than building a set for Allegra's apartment. Actually, I don't know if she even has an apartment. I don't think we've ever seen her outside of work. Same with Chester, but I just assumed he's been living in Star Labs since he first showed up. If you pay attention, there's a very noticeable lack of variety in locations this season, like how the poker tournament took place in the only bar these characters ever seem to go to.
I mean, I can still use some company in this big ol' empty house.
So yeah, that's the A story, but what about the B story? Well, Mark has become fixated on the idea that Keone has some kind of power, because when she kissed him to bring him back to life, she seemed to use familiar ice abilities, so he thinks there might be more of Frost left inside her.
Why did you kiss me?
Mark starts to get a little obsessed with Keone at this point, and say what you will about this show, but having a guy fall in love with a month-old cosmic being who's wearing the skin of his dead girlfriend's twin sister, you can call that a lot of things, but you can't call it unoriginal. Anyway, the end of this little narrative cul-de-sac is Chester discovering that Keone is not a metahuman, but according to her DNA readings, she's not quite human either.
Oh, I don't know what that means.
Oh, don't worry. We'll find out. And then Barry and Iris show back up for a surprise baby shower in their apartment, because every episode of this season has to end with some kind of party, I guess. And yeah, that's all I have to say about this episode. There's really nothing to dig into, nothing from this leads anywhere, and if this had been a random filler episode in season 6 or 7, it would have fit just as well. The only notable thing about this, at least on a personal level, is that the guy who plays Tony was also in one of my favorite terrible Hallmark movies called Mismatched. If you haven't seen this movie, and chances are very good you haven't, I need you to watch it.
You can sue him.
Well, unfortunately, he's one of your best friends, so I'm not gonna sue him.
I would much rather talk about Mismatched for several hours than The Flash, but let's stay on topic. Okay, episode 7. Not too much to say about this one either, it's just more fluff. It's definitely one of the more confusing episodes in the season, but it's a very passive confusion. Honestly, I don't know what to make of it. So we open in a mysterious warehouse, because God knows we haven't seen enough of those yet, and it quickly becomes clear that this is yet another dream sequence. Except the person dreaming is a character I've never seen before in my entire life. I'm not being flippant, I have no idea who this is. Apparently her name, or alter ego, is Dreamer, and every single thing I know about her is information that's conveyed through this episode, and I refuse to look more information up, because I don't need to make any more room in my brain for Arrowverse lore. Anyway, based on the characters she references, I've gathered that she was on the Supergirl show, and apparently her power is manipulating dream energy, which is about as vague of a concept as having good luck, so points for consistency. We see some flashbacks to the other show where it seems like she can do pretty much anything, but presumably the actual dreams are the most important bit, and that's where we start. So Dreamer sees a vision of a strange hooded figure, then Iris is there, but she falls over and dies, and Dreamer's interpretation is that this mysterious figure is the one who did that, or is going to do that, but also it's the Flash, so like I said before, the hero's first theory about what's going on and who this villain is always wrong.
What did you do to her? Why did you kill her?
It's so funny to me that the show is still trying to use the idea of Iris's death to create any tension. Later on in the episode, she and Dreamer get trapped inside their minds, and the ticking clock is that if they don't get out fast enough, their brains will die or whatever, but I didn't believe for 1 second that Iris was in any danger.
I know that Iris is gonna pull through this. She's gonna be fine. She and Nia are both gonna be okay.
Again, I really would have loved to see some actual structural experimentation this season, because in broad strokes, we've seen this episode before. Many times. And like the last episode, there's nothing in here that wouldn't belong in a random filler episode from any previous season. And in context, that's insane to me. We are halfway through the final season, and this episode is all about concluding the arc of a side character from a different show, which is accomplished by Iris facing the exact same internal conflict she went through in episode 1, and this is the second episode in a row where Barry does absolutely nothing. He doesn't even put his costume on. What is the title of the show?
I had a great time at Mimosa Brunch with you, Kara, Alex, and Ryan, but I didn't expect to see you again so soon.
Oh yeah? All those superheroes got brunch together? That sounds fun. I'm so glad we get to hear about all this interesting stuff happening off screen instead of actually seeing it. Anyway, the main thrust of the episode is Iris getting trapped in Dreamer's dream, or it's like a shared dream. I don't know, it doesn't matter. But in the dream, she's seeing all of these potential alternate life paths for herself. And of course, in every reality, she's just the best at everything.
You're unstoppable. Okay, sure.
But like I said, she's already been through this journey, and she comes to the same conclusion about taking control of her life, even though it seems to be moving along a predetermined path.
She's a fake. She doesn't have a life. She has a checklist.
It's not even a different perspective on the issue, it's just the same conflict. So yeah, they go through a few dreams, nothing really means anything or changes, which is awesome. And as they wrap up this extremely boring adventure, Dreamer discovers that the mysterious hooded figure following them was actually the first Dreamer. And then she's also able to believe in herself and embrace her powers, because that's just what someone is guaranteed to do 3/4 of the way through any given episode of this show. And maybe this development would mean anything if Dreamer had ever appeared in even one episode of this show before now, or even been mentioned, but she hasn't. Oh yeah, she's also an alien?
She is the first woman on my mother's planet Naltor to receive the dreaming gift.
You know, I may not understand any of what Dreamer's talking about, or why she's even here, but maybe there were some Supergirl fans out there who were desperate to see this character's story get tied up. If that didn't already happen in the Supergirl show, I don't know, I haven't seen it, but I guess if someone gets that resolution from this, that's kind of good. But for me, it's pretty easy to call this episode another misfire, and like the last episode, this has nothing to do with how the show is going to end. Even the B story with Mark and Keone is just more wheel spinning.
I hate shirts anyway.
But now he's escalated into just straight up trying to turn her into his dead girlfriend. He offers to take Keone on a variety of dates he used to go on with Frost, even though she doesn't want to. And if you're now watching for hints of budgetary restrictions, you might notice that they go from talking about the dates in Star Labs to arriving at the same bar set we always see to talk about them some more.
So, paintball was interesting.
Don't worry, we got plenty more stops on the chill train tonight.
So all of this awkwardness culminates in Mark trying to get Keone to sing karaoke with him, but she shuts him down in front of the entire bar. And this scene is a real diamond in the rough because the writers made the genuinely funny decision to have the other bar patrons interact with this sort of breakup scene.
And it was amazing, and the chemistry was off the frickin' charts.
No outside. No one wants to hear this.
It's a simple joke, like sitcom level stuff, but I like it. It's just so rare to find an aspect of this show that is earnestly funny.
Sue me! If I just wanted to see if this could be the real thing.
Don't you ever talk to me like that.
It's like it's from another show, but everything else in the episode is a tragic reminder of what we're actually watching.
We are two badass, smart women.
So, after the third good scene in 7 episodes, Mark is now on the outs with Team Flash. That's right, he previously murdered several people and framed their friend for doing it, and he also built the machine that almost destroyed the world after betraying everyone again twice, and all of that got him accepted into Team Flash a few times. But then he hurts Keone's feelings once and everyone just shuns him. You'd think Barry might have something to say about this, considering all the trouble he went through to save him. So yeah, Mark says goodbye and rides off into the sunset to find himself or whatever. Initially, I thought this would be the last time we'd ever see him because there seems to be even less than nothing for him to do at this point, but don't worry, he'll be back. Actually, you can worry. And to close out this essential chapter, Team Flash, who are once again assembled at some kind of social gathering because it's the end of the episode, all give Keone a group hug to make her feel better. And yeah, that's episode 7. That's it. Most of it just goes in one ear and right out the other, and that's not going to change too much next episode either. I will say that we are past what I would call the worst of it now, but best is just so relative. Alright, episode 8. We're going to break our negative streak here for a minute because I think this episode is pretty solid. I'd almost call it good, but because it's still working with the same basic pieces as the rest of the season, it does get dragged down a bit. But as a whole, I think it's a functional little bottle episode. In fact, as I was watching it, I realized that a lot of the aspects I was enjoying were the same things that I had issues with in the last 2 episodes. Namely, that these events feel superfluous and the story is revisiting the same themes the season has already explored a few times now. But I don't know, the specific alchemy of this episode just worked for me. Or at least worked well enough that I wasn't checking how much time was left in the runtime every couple of minutes. So, we open in the future, where Star Labs has become the Flash Museum, and we see yet another mysterious figure in a robe enter and get trapped inside when the security system activates. Finally, an actual security system in this goddamn building. This person quickly escapes through a time portal, and we see that they're heading for the present. Well, actually, in terms of this video, it's the past, but you get it. In the show's present, Barry and Iris are discussing how excited they are for their daughter's impending arrival. Barry is going full dad mode, he's using his speed to help Iris with her random pregnancy cravings. It's adorable.
Ooh, you know what I could go for right now is some of that
vanilla bean.
I really like Barry and Iris's dynamic in this episode. The story focuses on how they work together as a team in many areas. They're given more jokes than arguments, and the chemistry, the charm, it's just there. I also think the writers just used this episode to poke some fun at the show, and I can't blame them. It's very fun to do. And there are a few times where characters basically break the fourth wall and start saying things that I've been saying for years.
Iris, running to the future again, when it never works. I should know that by now.
I found this very validating, just this feeling of, oh, thank God, they also know it's stupid.
Whatever's happening has just started, but it's gonna escalate fast. It always does.
So the setup is that Barry arranges a mold inspection at Star Labs to make sure the environment is safe for Nora when she's born, because presumably she'll be spending her entire life in this building. But this process gets a few other city inspectors involved as well, which is more prying eyes in the Flash's headquarters than Barry was counting on. And I surprisingly love this idea. It's a fun way to explore this location we've come to know so well across the show, and there's lots of comedic potential in Barry and Iris trying to stay one step ahead of the inspectors and keep their real work under wraps. But instead, because it's this season, most of the episode takes place in just one room. Every time the characters try to leave, they find themselves walking back inside. So instead of a time loop, it's a room loop, and I feel like I'm trapped in a similar situation because Barry and Iris end up learning the same lesson from episode 1 again.
Spend each day doing what we want to do in the moment.
So yeah, I'll try to stay positive, but I do have to balance that out a bit, because even though this episode has some fun energy, the material is still pretty weak.
Yeah, if you ask me, they all seem like characters from a sitcom.
All of the inspectors are very broad comedic stereotypes. There's the one who takes things too seriously, the robotically smart one, the laid-back goofy one, and the one who's acting really suspicious and definitely isn't behind whatever's going on.
So, your thing with the electrical stuff in it?
The electrician's unusual.
So, once Barry reveals the nature of the situation to the inspectors, and reveals that he's the Flash, because of course he does, they try to figure out who's behind it, but we can obviously skip over that. So, as a result of this time traveler coming back and stealing something, there's a bunch of time shenanigans, everyone's clothes get transformed into various period costumes, one of the inspectors gets turned into a statue, so basically, the timeline is collapsing inwards, and none of this setup makes too much sense, not in terms of logic, but more in that everything is just keeping the characters and the audience confused until the big reveal. The episode in general is sort of a love letter to science fiction, but there are so many references and ideas smushed together, and only so much budget available to realize those ideas, that it all just comes across as a vaguely cheap version of something else. But still, the emotional core of the episode, as randomly as it appears, does resonate. As Barry and Iris talk about how to escape the loop, Iris breaks down, frustrated because she feels like she can't trust herself.
Like my body, Barry, I can feel it changing.
And look, I've never been pregnant, as I'm sure many of you could guess, but this moment struck me as very real, especially in the middle of this wacky scenario. I mean, we've seen and heard Iris's concerns about the future before, but it's hard to connect with them because they're all hypotheticals that we know will never actually happen. But this is happening to her, and it's a challenge that can't really be solved. You see what these episodes can accomplish when the conflict isn't just, you lied to me. Anyway, Barry and Iris trick the obvious bad guy into revealing that she's an obvious bad guy, and she shows off her true villainous form, which is... I mean, it's something.
What's the solution, Speedy?
Does she stick those tiny hands on her forehead every time she robs a place? Whatever. So after some more convoluted technobabble, they eventually realize that the only way to restore the timeline to its proper state is for Clockface here to return the random science device she stole, which will also result in her getting arrested in the future. So it's kind of cool to see a villain make the choice to be defeated, but this also doesn't feel very satisfying as an ending because there's never a feeling of real danger, and then the villain just walks into a portal and disappears, never to be seen again. Ever. The inspectors are back to normal, some of them have their memories of the experience and some don't. I'm not really sure how that bit works, but that's the thing about time travel, Barry. The more you do it, the less the rules apply to you. And then Barry and Iris say they love each other and they'll always be there for each other for the millionth time, and that's it.
Best husband ever.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the B story, the conflict revolves around Chester and Allegra saying I love you for the first time, and I know these guys are supposed to be the young characters, but this is like high school CW drama stuff. It's actually kind of surprising how nothing this subplot is.
All I know is that I love you and you mean the world to me.
I will admit that I did get a full body cringe sensation when Chester said that, just from the awkwardness, and I'm impressed by that reaction because accurately evoking a feeling is a rare accomplishment on this show. The issue is, that's as deep as the conflict goes. Chester says, I love you too soon. Allegra gets worried because everyone she loves dies, yada yada. She has one conversation with Cecile about it, and then she says,
I love you too.
And that's it. That's all. Which is weird. It's like the show is allergic to letting Chester and Allegra do anything, and this could have been a great chance to see them in action, see how they work as a team. Like, I don't know, Barry and Iris? Like the point of the episode? It's extra weird because the first time we see Chester and Allegra, they're discussing something that sounds like that, like an actual story.
Social media is buzzing with descriptions of a new light meta.
And I like that idea because Allegra struggling with being a public superhero is something we haven't really seen. Characters usually just get powers and start fighting with Barry. But there's some real drama here, like how Allegra's life is going to change, whether she even wants that change to happen, and how people will perceive her if it does happen. With Barry and Iris out of commission, this is the perfect time for Allegra to step up, embrace her powers, and show the people of Central City who she really is. And instead, as I'm sure you might be able to guess, none of that happens, and this is never mentioned again.
You know, when I went all Nova at O'Shaughnessy's a couple weeks ago?
Of course I do. You're so badass.
Thanks.
Oh yeah, there's also this flashback montage near the end where we see a bunch of memorable moments that have happened in Star Labs across the previous seasons, which is kind of nice, but also makes me wish that some more memorable moments had been created in this episode, not just referenced, you know? I get what it's going for, but if the ultimate point of this episode was just to say, aren't these sets great? Then I guess I would say, sure. Anyway, that's episode 8. It's cute, it's fine, and I don't actively hate watching it, so that makes it the best episode so far. Whatever, let's keep going. Okay, episode 9. So we open with Chester, Allegra, and Cecile getting coffee and discussing the surprise birthday party they're planning for Barry. But not just any birthday. This is technically Barry's second 30th birthday, not 32nd birthday. Let me explain. Back in season 6, there was a random filler episode where Barry got blasted by a machine that made him age very rapidly, but they were able to reverse that process, and in doing so, it apparently took 3 years off Barry's life on a molecular level or something. I don't know, it's dumb, but whatever. The party kicks off, and the episode goes full fan service real quick. Wally's back, Sing's back, Diggle's back. Cisco is not. And because it's Barry, he's happy with the situation, but there's some angst under the surface. And that angst only grows stronger when Diggle gives Barry his gift, Oliver Queen's original bow. Barry's issue in this episode is basically survivor's guilt. He's celebrating extra years of his life, but he's lost friend after friend. Oliver, Frost, Caitlin, and the other ones who we don't talk about anymore. So he's wondering why he deserves to still be here instead of his loved ones, which is a good conflict for him to face at the end of his story.
Yo, I'll tell you what I want, what I really, really want. Yo, tell me what you want, what you really, really want.
Barry and Wally also catch up, and Wally reveals that through meditation, he's been able to project his consciousness across different timelines. This is another Speed Force power that you just have to roll with, even though I don't really see what it has to do with speed. But through all of this, there's a familiar threat lurking in the background. When everyone toasts Barry, the champagne tastes wrong. Almost like it contains a hint of pudding?
I hope you don't mind me crashing your party.
That's right, baby. The Pudding Man is back. They're finally picking up that thread from season 6.
Let's just call this the long game.
If you don't remember, that clip was from the last time we saw this guy, so you might assume that he's had some kind of long-running scheme unfolding in the shadows since we left him in that cell.
I've been playing the long game.
So, what was this long game of his? Well, he escaped.
You know, I came right back here so we could pick up where we left off.
Seems like a pretty short game if you ask me. He turns Team Flash into zombies, and then he traps Barry and Wally inside their own minds and tries to make them evil. Chester also doesn't drink, so he's the only side character left standing, and his part in the ongoing action is to hide in a room and get taunted by zombie Allegra.
You're Ramsey, controlling her body.
And what a powerful body it is.
Until Keone appears and freezes all the blood in everyone's bodies, which somehow doesn't kill them and instead cures them of the pudding infection. You know what, let's just roll with that too. There's no point in questioning it. So, in Barry's mind, the Pudding Man uses memories of his dead friends to torture him, and in Wally's, he uses the memories of his traumatic childhood to shake his faith in his family. From Wally's twisted perspective, he was left alone and forgotten, while Barry lived what could or should have been his life, and the pudding just flows deeper and deeper. It does have a new bit I like, where the Pudding Man takes Barry onto a TV set as a way to continue his torture, which is a creative way to express Barry's internal conflict with his role as the protagonist of this world. It's out there, but it's memorable.
It's more important that you live. You're the star, right?
It's funny that the whole episode seems to be saying, doesn't Barry kind of suck, but also doesn't provide any real answer to that question? Basically, someone tells Barry he doesn't deserve the life he has, Barry agrees, and then someone else tells him he does, and he's fine. But over in Wally's head, the Pudding Man convinces him that all the pain he suffered can be undone, and the people he's lost can be brought back, because there are other versions of them across the multiverse. Wait, what? But the multiverse was destroyed.
A crisis to end the multiverse. But I guess it didn't take.
It didn't take. Okay, if you need a refresher, when Crisis went down, Oliver sacrificed himself to create a new universe after the previous one was destroyed by a big evil man, which tends to happen in stories like these. So the point of this new world was that all the different shows had converged into one dimension, and the multiverse was no longer a thing.
But I guess it didn't take.
So yeah, it turns out that there is just another multiverse now. Or I guess there always was one. And we learn more about this when Wally turns evil after he says what we've all been thinking for years.
Shut up, Barry. Just shut up.
Then he kills Barry and sends him to Forest Purgatory to hang out with Oliver. Oh yeah, Oliver's back. And Oliver basically says he made the new multiverse by accident.
I took on the power of the Spectre. I thought that I was simply creating Earth Prime. But I was also making something else.
Also, that's the real story behind Red Death. She was just from another Earth. She really was just knockoff Zoom. And yeah, you heard me right before. Barry dies, and within essentially the same scene gets brought back to life. So now death doesn't matter either, apparently.
Say the line, Bart!
You have failed this city!
So yeah, even though he's dead and kind of God now, Oliver is able to return to the mortal plane when the multiverse is in danger.
It's just temporary. I can only intervene when the multiverse is in danger.
So where was he when Red Death was trying to tear a hole in said multiverse a few episodes back? Stop asking questions. Anyway, the Pudding Man has a pudding plan, and now that he has Wally on his side, he's ready to chow down. So the real long game is to use Wally to open a portal through the multiverse, which Wally can apparently just do with his mind now, and then spread evil pudding across every world.
Millions of worlds waiting for your lifeblood.
Yeah, this is all really dumb, especially because the show insists that there was some kind of plan here, but everything relevant to what happens in this episode, we learn about in this episode. At least in this show, Wally never had this power before now, and I have no idea how the Pudding Man knows about it. I mean, he was in his brain, but if he didn't know beforehand, that's like crazy good luck for him. So there's a big fight. Barry and Wally have a little chase. Oliver punches some zombies, but finds his powers weakened because of all the pudding. So Diggle shows up to save him with this villain's secret weakness, a bazooka. Barry is able to get through to Wally with a speech about friendship because, of course, and the Pudding Man actually does turn into his giant monster form, which I appreciate. I really didn't think they'd bother to do that effect again, and it still looks solid. Then Barry and Wally reappear and tie the monster up with lightning, and Oliver shoots a magical arrow into the portal, which somehow destroys all the pudding. I don't know. And because all the pudding has been wiped out, Ramsey Rosso is now human again. And because of that, he also has cancer again, but don't worry.
Now my HLH will return.
You took care of that too. Perks of being the Spectre.
Oh, I guess he can cure cancer now, too. I'm sorry, I can't get past this. Oliver has just been around and has been able to do this for the last 3 seasons, so why did he never—
I'm only allowed to intervene when the multiverse is in danger.
Yeah, I heard you the first time. And no, the only reason he didn't intervene was because nobody knew the multiverse existed until this episode. Whatever, so everyone just goes back to the party like nothing happened because nothing really did, and this thinly veiled Arrow reunion special comes to an end.
So the multiverse exists again.
It's a miracle.
That's one word for it. Then, Barry and Oliver share one final scene together in, of course, the same bar, and I do have to admit, it's just nice to see these two on screen together again. I mean, I wouldn't call myself a Stephen Amell fan, but I am glad that the last note of his time in this universe was a nice one.
You kidding? You're a billionaire.
You can't take it with you.
And then Oliver disappears back into the ether, and even though this episode was just a constant torrent of references and lore dumping, it does feel appropriately conclusive. The next few episodes will make up a 4-part series finale, so this is the last normal episode of this show, if there is such a thing. I don't really like this episode, but I do feel more forgiving of it to a degree. It's partially nostalgia, or majorly nostalgia, but it's also the first episode that felt like it was continuing or resolving something that felt like it was meaningful to the show as a whole. You know, if I'm being honest, sometimes I worry that because I've been watching and analyzing this show for so long, I might be interpreting things wrong because of my preconceived ideas of what the show is trying to do or say. Sometimes it can help to see familiar stories through fresh eyes, you know? So I thought it would be funny to watch this season for the first time with my good friend James, who had never seen an episode of this show before and only had my videos as context. He did give up after this episode, and I don't blame him, but based on what he saw up to here, I came up with a series of questions for him to see how Season 9 held up on its own. So please join me for the first and maybe only round of... How many episodes of The Flash have you seen now?
I believe it has been 8.
Do you understand what's going on?
No, no. He's running around and...
Is there anything you need clarification on?
How come, like, he can run from one state to another in 2 seconds to get his wife ice cream, but whenever he's fighting a villain, he's not that fast and they beat him?
Do you think this show is good?
I feel like people are going to disagree with me here, but not very good. No. I mean, granted, I did jump in during season 9 and I haven't seen a single episode beforehand, but I'm not enjoying it so far.
What jumps out to you about the show more than anything?
Oh, the writing, how good it is.
Do you think The Flash is a good superhero?
I like The Flash. Like, as a concept, I don't personally love him in the show, but a guy that goes really fast, yeah, sign me up.
What would you do with super speed?
Probably a lot of illegal things. Like, I'd want to, like, sneak into, like, Chernobyl, maybe. Just, like, you know, check it out and then run out of there. Maybe Area 51, bet on horse races, stuff like that.
What do you think of the supervillains?
I liked the costume of Red Death.
Do you find the action sequences interesting or exciting?
They got a lot of bright lights.
How do you feel about the side characters?
I barely remember any of their names besides Chester.
Do you care about Chester and Allegra's relationship?
In all honesty, it's the most I'm interested in right now.
Do you appreciate Chillblaine as much as I do?
I mean, he's got cool gloves and a cool jacket whenever he wants to be a villain. Other than that, he needs to get his
shirt on.
Well, no, actually, no, he needs to keep it off. Actually, more so. He just needs to figure out his love life.
Do you think the actors on this show are good?
I can't answer that question because the script is just so bad. I can't even. I don't even if they're trying, they can't be good.
Would you want to live in Central City?
No. I mean, unless the rent was really good because of all the shit that happens there.
Does this feel like the final season of a long-running series to you?
No, it just didn't.
What's your favorite thing about this show?
I mean, I can't always predict what's going to happen next.
What's your biggest complaint about this show?
The effects.
Would you recommend this show to anyone?
No. No.
Are you looking forward to more episodes?
No. Ever since we watched the first one, I've been dreading every week.
Can you imagine watching 9 years of this?
Yes, actually. Like, if I was into it when I was really young, yeah, I'd be into it. It's like Kingdom Hearts, you know? All over again. It's like you're in there from the beginning, and you gotta be there till it ends, and you never know when it's gonna end. It could outlive you, and it probably will.
Okay, episode 10. We're in the home stretch now. And look, I don't want to beat around the bush here. I really don't think the show sticks the landing. I know that's probably not shocking given the Flash's general track record, but part of me still wanted to believe it could finish on a high note. Instead, it's more of a slightly below the middle note. So the episode begins with the camera following and very deliberately hiding a man getting ready for work in a home that seems very familiar. And to jump ahead a couple minutes to when his face is finally in frame, it's Eddie. Eddie Thawne. He's back. Again. But Eddie's dead, and this guy has a different name and works in a science lab. Oh, that's also from season 8. They really just did this again.
Some folks never learn.
Anyway, that was just a tease. We'll get back to him later. Over at Star Labs, Allegra is trying out a potential costume that Chester made for her, and it's not great, and I want you to remember this. Remember that Allegra is looking for a new costume, because the payoff is unbelievable.
Do you want to come over to the house and help me take this off?
So Chester and Allegra go off to have sex in the house where Barry grew up with the sister he married, because somehow that's where this show ended up. Meanwhile, in the vague area outside Central City where Joe is now living, he's enjoying breakfast with Cecile. Their new arrangement seems to be working, but if you think the show still won't have an entire episode about Cecile's doubts that she can make it work, then I don't know what show you've been watching. Meanwhile, again, Keown returns to Caitlin's apartment, where I guess she's living now. Does she have to pay rent? Does she know what rent is? Anyway, she writes a journal/letter to her dead sisters, and the editing gets a little... I don't know how to describe it. It's so strikingly different from the rest of the show that I'd almost call it experimental.
So wherever you are, Mark, I hope you're okay.
Meanwhile, again, over in the Allen loft, Iris is feeling very ready to give birth, and she learns via generic phone notification that her article about the Red Death has been nominated for a Pulitzer, just as the map book foretold. Ooh! But as they start to celebrate, Barry gets grabbed by some mysterious energy force and teleported away. When he gets his bearings, he realizes that he's been taken back to the year 2000, which means that Barry finally has the chance to right the wrong that's haunted him his entire life. He can stop Bush from winning the election. Okay, no, it's his mom's death, obviously. He's actually been taken back to the day of her murder, which he discovers when he goes to the police station to get some help from Joe.
I need your help.
Okay.
As Barry leaves the station, he sees his parents together, just walking around the city. But even though he doesn't want to engage, a mysterious red blur hits him and launches him into the street. Henry and Nora stop him from getting hit by a car in what I'm pretty sure is a Back to the Future reference, but it might just be similar. And because they're so eager to help, Barry finds himself in the middle of a scenario that he's not emotionally prepared for at all.
What? Oh, whoa, I got you.
I find this sequence and this whole episode really quite moving. I think Grant Gustin is at his best here, and seeing him get overwhelmed at just being in the same room as his parents really makes me wish that this season had leaned into the fatherhood angle with Barry more often. He's just been excited to be a dad, which is nice, but not very insightful given all the parental trauma Barry has suffered and which would probably inform his decision to be a father. Still, Barry does allow himself some time with Henry and Nora, but in the background of all this, year 2000 Joe has been following Barry, because he was acting really suspicious, and he discovers a mysterious crystal on the ground that starts talking to him. And look, I don't blame him for picking it up because it's going to be over a decade before talking crystals are the kind of problems this police force will face on a weekly basis. But when he grabs it, his eyes glow and he becomes possessed. Now, if you don't recognize this particular rock, this is where the negative Speed Force lives or is maybe trapped. I don't know if they ever clarified that. And speaking of that force, Barry comes face to face with someone who he would inevitably meet today, the Reverse Flash. This time he has Matt Lesher's face, and wait a minute, I thought he was gone. Like, permanently gone.
And Gideon says there's no Thawne anywhere in the timeline.
Then it's really over.
Well, I guess technically this version of Thawne can't be dead because he has to kill Barry's mother to set him on the path of being the Flash. Except wait, in the original timeline before the show started, Barry's mom wasn't killed and he just became the Flash later, so you know what? I'm tired of trying to work it out. It doesn't matter. This show's timeline is held together with duct tape and a dream. So Barry and Thawne get a drink together at what is apparently the only bar in Central City across all time, and Barry realizes that he's living through his own origin story, only now he's on the other side of it.
You're here to kill me as a child.
You always were smart.
So, before he goes to face the most painful moment of his life, Barry returns to Nora and Henry, and in a beautiful little scene, is able to say goodbye to them without directly saying goodbye. He tells them things he never got the chance to, and gets to hear what they would probably say back.
Wherever they are, they're proud of you, son.
I love this stuff. Everything in this episode that has to do with Barry in the past is such an enormous leap in quality that I would have been happy to see all 4 parts of this story play out here. But of course, the goofiness must return. As Barry makes his way out of the hospital, he comes face to face with the now possessed Joe, who reveals himself as the force that's been tormenting Barry for so long.
I know what happens today. Because I've been waiting for it since the dawn of time.
Since the dawn of time, huh? Then, what took so long? Where were you all season? So there's a big fight between Barry and Evil Joe, and it's so surreal to see an action scene between these two characters where they're both shooting lasers out of their hands. But it's not as simple as just punching the bad guy here. Joe is still alive inside his body, so if Barry throws a lightning bolt the wrong way, the timeline will definitely be different. Eventually, Barry wins the battle because that's what he does, and the crystal leaves Joe and disappears. From there, Barry runs to the suburbs to catch up with Thawne, but he's not there to fight. Instead, he goes with a more reliable approach, which is giving a big speech about how the villain should just not be evil.
You can change all that if you just walk away.
But of course, we know what Thawne is going to do, and the show comes full circle. Now that we've seen how they got there, Barry and Thawne crash into the house, while the version of Barry from the end of season 1 appears upstairs. In terms of emotional power, this scene really knocked me back. because symbolically, this is the end of Barry's journey. He's become the hero that can accept his own pain and lead the timeline down the path it needs to go on, even at the cost of his family. So, Barry escapes with his younger self, Thawne kills Nora and loses his speed, and we're right back where the show started. But this time, we see a little more. Barry comes back to face Thawne, and Thawne realizes that Nora's death is a fixed point in time. Barry was never trying to stop him. This was always going to happen. And then we get one of the most satisfying moments between a hero and a villain in any comic book media I've ever seen.
And today brought me the peace I've been looking for ever since. I have you to thank for that, Eobard, and I'll always be grateful.
That's just so good. It's perfect. It's the perfect ending for this show, and I can't fathom why this story wasn't the series finale. This episode is nostalgic with purpose. It effectively shows where Barry's been and where he ended up. He overcomes the greatest pain he ever faced, and he's even able to thank his oldest enemy for inflicting it. Where do you even go from here? In my opinion, this episode is the show's true ending, and everything after this is just a superfluous epilogue. We know Nora's going to be born, we know they're going to beat the evil crystal, Cisco isn't coming back, there's nothing to look forward to. But this is just part one, and we have to work with what we've got, so what else have we got? Well, there's a little post-credit scene where Not Eddie here gets struck by lightning, and when he wakes up, he finds a file with a more familiar name on it.
Who the hell is Eddie Thawne?
And just to let you know, this is actually Eddie. There's not some weird clone or alternate reality thing going on here. But who is just one question, and the far more important one is why? The answer to that is, well, it's not great. Alright, episode 11. We are back to all filler, no killer. So the episode opens with Eddie again, and this time he's wandering into his version of CCPD headquarters to look for help. But what he gets instead are a lot of confused looks, because the officers in there definitely know him, but based on what they know, he shouldn't be there.
We need to talk.
The next few episodes really drag out the reveal of what's going on with Eddie, but just to give you a clearer picture of what's happening, at least in terms of time and space, this is just the future. It's not like a pocket dimension or the afterlife or his own dream, it's just the year 2049. But not the good one. Back in 2023, Team Flash are having a meeting about Barry's sudden disappearance, and I love that they set up a clear board just to essentially write, "Barry's gone" on it. And now that they're facing a cosmic force that's existed since the beginning of the universe, there's only one person who can help them. The guy with ice gloves. That's right, Mark is back in town, and his time off screen has apparently cured him of his underlying craziness, so now he just acts like a completely different person.
A few months after I left, I reached back out to Cecile.
Why would he reach out to Cecile? I think this is the first time they've ever spoken directly in the entire show. Either way, all hands are on deck, except those other very useful hands who they don't call in for some reason. And priority number one is finding out where Barry went.
And I can call Cisco at Argus, see if maybe they've heard anything.
Oh hey, he does still exist. Later on, over at CCC Media, Iris and Allegra share a solid scene where they discuss the pressure Iris is under, but as Allegra leaves the room, she's attacked by someone that she seems to recognize. Soon after that, a gas leak breaks out in the newsroom, leading most of the employees to evacuate. But a few of them get caught in the leak and pass out, putting their lives in danger. Soon enough, Keone and Mark arrive to contain the situation and bring in some superhero solutions. Keone's idea is a unique one. She transforms the cells inside the unconscious bodies into plant cells, which allows the people to breathe more easily, but has some unexpected visual side effects.
I don't know what you are, but stay away from us!
And look, this would be a distressing thing to experience, but at the same time, these are journalists in Central City. Surely they would know that something like this would happen to them someday. Either way, this reaction shakes Keone's confidence, and then they find Allegra, who's still knocked out. Meanwhile, in the future, Eddie is continuing to explore the bizarre reality he's found himself in. According to his ID, his name is Malcolm Gilmore and he works at Mercury Labs, but he's starting to have flashes of memories that he can't identify, and he hears a mysterious voice calling to him.
Did you hear something?
Now, if I was a police officer working in this city at this point in time, I would get this guy in a magical jail cell as fast as possible, because everything about this situation just screams bad guy, you know? But instead, Eddie just kind of runs away and is not stopped. The way these Eddie scenes play out is pretty reflective of the season as a whole. It's a lot of wandering around and waiting for there to be a point. Meanwhile, back at Star Labs, Keown is talking to Mark about their experience at the news station, and while he initially seemed a lot calmer and more supportive, that goes away pretty quick.
I really thought you were going to be a hero. You're an abomination.
But don't worry, this is not a case of inconsistent writing. Mark has just been possessed by the evil crystal, and he continues making his way through the team, taking out Cecile next. But before he can get to Iris, which seems to be his ultimate goal, she's saved by the intervention of this show's third or fourth most frequently employed Deus Ex Machina, Speed Force Nora. If you're getting confused by all the Noras running around, basically there's Barry's mom Nora, who was human and is now dead, Speed Force Nora, who is the physical manifestation of the Speed Force, which we've talked about, and Baby Nora, who is currently inside of Iris and will later grow up into the Speedster XS, but not the same version of XS from Season 5. Got all that? Too bad. Back in the present, Keown returns from doing whatever she does when she leaves a scene and talks with Speed Force Nora. Now, I despise even the idea of this scene because there is nothing less interesting to me than two godlike beings sitting in a room and talking about how their feelings are hurt, but they still have to help people.
I'm inhuman. That's the point.
Anyway, when Keown inevitably gets her groove back, she reveals that she's connected to every living being on Earth. Every person, every plant, every animal, and I can't help but wonder, where's Barry? This show is still called The Flash, right? So, Keown returns to Caitlin's apartment. She probably could have just opened the door, and she faces off against Evil Mark, or regular Mark. And here, Keown is facing the same problem as Barry did last episode, which is that to stop the negative Speed Force, she runs the risk of killing her friend. But because it's Keown, she's already won. So she decides to disintegrate Mark into a big pile of dirt, which is fitting, and she removes the crystal from his body by removing his body from the equation. As this happens, there's a flashback montage to all the time that Mark and Keown spent together. So the first time I watched this episode, I assumed this was how Mark was really going to die, and I laughed harder than I've ever laughed at anything. But as my phrasing might imply, Mark isn't actually dead, again, and Keown immediately rebuilds his body. So she now also has the power to raise the dead, which pretty quickly eliminates any remaining stakes that could have been drawn out of Team Flash fighting an evil Rock. Said Rock then disappears to prolong this story even further, and Keown reveals her true nature to Mark.
I'm a goddess.
I mean, you might not think this development is too narratively offensive, and if so, once again, congratulations on having a functional brain, but I'm stuck with my brain, and while I'm not angry, I'm just stunned that this is what this whole storyline was about. Caitlin killed herself by accident and also turned herself into God.
I think I need to leave.
Oh yeah, and then Iris goes into labor because that's the only thing left for her to do. I know that sounds misogynistic, but she really has no other role to play in how the series ends, which, given what's coming, is crazy. And just as everything gets wrapped up, Barry reappears in the present to find out that Iris is about to pop, and then he immediately gets time-napped again. As it turns out, the negative Speed Force's plan is to attack Barry on 3 fronts: past, present, and future, so you know where he's heading next, and who he's likely to meet. Speaking of which, in 2049, Eddie is busy digging up his own grave, but he's interrupted by the future police captain, Korber. I like that weird future gun she has. You're gonna want to remember that prop. But despite how impossible it seems, Eddie is convinced of who he is. And as he accepts his true self, a bullet hole appears in his shirt, and then he digs out the bullet? And the bullet was hiding somehow, I guess for dramatic effect? I've already seen the episodes that follow this, but even with context, I have no idea what's going on here. But all this stuff with the lightning and the file and the bullet, it doesn't really mean anything, because the answer to what's going on just comes down to the negative speed force brought Eddie back to life so he can be its next avatar. And since the whole avatar concept is so half-baked, I really don't know how I'm supposed to feel about this. There's no excitement, because now we're building up to essentially the same final battle as the end of last season. Whatever, let's just keep trudging through. Okay, episode 12. We're still following Eddie, who's having a mild breakdown in his own grave, which is at least a unique visual.
I'm alive and I need to know why!
And then a portal opens in the sky and sucks up Corber. It's never explained where this portal goes, so I guess in the final timeline of this show, this somewhat prominent side character just disappears one day, and her friends and family never know why. So, in the present, Speed Force Nora jump cuts into the Cortex to tell Team Flash that she's dying again, that Barry has been sent to the future, and that the last remnants of her power now exist only in Barry's family. That last bit makes the whole Avatar idea a little more clear, but given how the next episode plays out, it feels like the writers really wanted to climb out of the hole they dug themselves into with the whole forces concept. And as you've probably noticed by now, those other forces haven't even been mentioned this season, which is strange, but not unsurprising given how every single person who watched this show reacted to that storyline. Anyway, Speed Force Nora says goodbye to all these people she kind of knows, and then she jump cuts into oblivion, and I guess she's dead again. Nobody in the room seems to know how to react to this, and I wouldn't either. Then we go to the future again, where Chester, Allegra, and Cecile are looking pretty good for being 26 years older than they are in the show's present. You might even say they look exactly the same. Also, is this the costume Allegra ultimately ends up with? Just like a jacket and some pants? 26 years of R&D, and this is the best that Chester could do.
I told you it wasn't a good idea to put a museum on top of our secret lair.
But then the worst possible visitor arrives and discovers that his sacrifice didn't quite turn out the way he hoped. Since the Reverse Flash eventually returned multiple times, they even have the exact footage from Season 8 on display somehow. The future really is incredible. I will admit though, in terms of bringing Eddie back into the story, having him face the idea that his sacrifice was meaningless, and that Barry essentially started living the life that was going to be his, oh hey, they're also repeating that. The point is, that actually is a compelling idea to work with, especially since Eddie has been brought back to be a villain. As far as motivations go, I get why he's a little unhinged right now. He's having a rough day, and that day just gets rougher as the negative speed force continues to infect his mind, giving him visions of the life he lost with hilarious results.
It's me, Dad. I'm your daughter.
I know this is just supposed to be a symbolic stand-in for the daughter he never had, but I also love the literal implication that the only variable factor of having a baby with Iris is the hair. Anyway, as another portal opens, the real Nora shows up to save Eddie, who remembers meeting her in Season 8 along with her brother. Oh yeah, where's Bart? Kind of weird that he's not even mentioned, right?
You know how things were supposed to be. You can have that life if you take it.
So in this episode, Nora is the one who gets possessed by the crystal, and she's trying to subtly turn Eddie to the side of evil. This ruse gets interrupted when present-day Barry shows up and evil Nora can't help but attack him, but Barry is still able to escape with Eddie. And sure, it's nice to see Eddie and Barry reunite just on a basic nostalgic level, but again, it's weird that Iris has so little to do with this scenario aside from being another symbol of what Eddie lost.
I could get the girl.
And I know we're not supposed to agree with the evil rock when it tells Eddie that he's entitled to this life he never got, but it does feel kind of weird to frame Iris's character that way. Like the only part she can play in this emotional equation is just being an object of more yearning. Because even in Season 1, Iris had more going on than just, who am I gonna date? That romantic tension was mainly a distraction for her, even annoying at times, because her brother kept trying to date her. It's a weird scenario. Have I mentioned that before? I feel like I've mentioned that before. And sure, journalism is still a central facet of her character. She's hitting some real milestones this season in terms of that, but it's all happening either off screen or someone just tells her what she's going to accomplish and then she does.
My article, Nightmare Under Red Skies, has been nominated for a Pulitzer.
It happened?
Yeah.
It feels like the show is trying to forcibly circle everything back to the story's beginning, but episode 10 already covered the most interesting parts of that. Nobody has thought about Eddie since season 2, except for when he showed up last season.
The second I died, everyone forgot about me.
See, he gets it. So yeah, Eddie just decides to be evil, and the turn is so sudden and so extreme that this character isn't even recognizably Eddie anymore. It really could have been anyone, so in the background of all this, the real main character has been dealing with her own issues. In 2023, Team Flash plugs Cecile into a machine that can project her consciousness into her future body, so they can find the past version of Barry, present version, I don't know what I mean anymore.
Damn, looking good, future me. What?
But when Cecile talks to her future friends, they reveal that she hasn't been out to see Joe in a long time, and she becomes consumed with guilt at the idea that focusing on being a hero might come at the cost of her family. This is, once again, the same issue that she's already overcome. This whole subplot is a complete waste of time, and the only new development is that she gets a big costume reveal at the end.
Cecile.
Actually, call me Virtue.
Yeah, Cecile gets a new costume. Did the writers put her name where they meant to put Allegra's in the script or something? What happened here? It's just baffling to me that Barry is facing the ultimate attack on his family and his future, and yet we are still devoting half the episode to Cecile sitting in a corner and crying because she doesn't believe in herself again. It's even stranger that Chester is the one who gives her the pep talk that snaps her out of it, because I'm pretty sure this is another pair of characters who have never spoken outside of a group setting until now.
I'm not the best person for this one, Chester. You are.
How is Chester the better option? You're God. Anyway, after another boring speedster chase and another scene where the negative Speed Force says, if you kill me, you kill the person I'm possessing, Barry tries to talk Nora out of it by saying, I know you're still in there, and I'm not kidding, that's verbatim dialogue.
Nora, please. I know you're still in there.
How many times do you think those exact words have been said on this show? It has to be 10, maybe 20,000, right? So yeah, big costume reveal, Nora's fine, the crystal disappears, and Barry goes to see 2049 Iris and then gets sucked away through time again. Seems like kind of a weird idea to make the exact same episode 3 times right before the finale, but I've talked about this season's repetitive nature almost as often as this dumb rock has ruined someone's day.
Why bring me back only to show me what I can't have?
The final scene shows Eddie embracing the negative Speed Force and being promised the same power as the other evil speedsters we've met. But all of them were also beaten by Barry, so it's not the best pitch. Either way, Eddie walks into a portal and heads for the series finale. Part of me never believed we'd reach this point, but every journey has to end somewhere. And this one's ending is... well, you'll see. Well, it's time for episode 13, the series finale. And because I knew that watching this for the first time would be such a special experience for me, James joined me once again and we recorded our live reactions.
It has been a hell of a week.
All right, let's get into it. So, things pick up pretty much where they left off. Eddie is now the avatar of the negative Speed Force, Barry has been brought back to the present, and Team Flash is waiting for the enemy to make their next move. And that move is a pretty crazy one, inside some sort of pocket dimension that I think is supposed to be inside the negative Speed Force somehow. Zoom suddenly appears. And then Godspeed. And then the Reverse Flash. And why is it Tom Cavanaugh now? Who cares?
Love your work, although
slightly derivative, don't you think?
Savitar is the last one to appear, rounding out this team of evil speedsters. Eddie tells them that their fate is to die facing off against the Allen family, but he brought them back together so they could change that. He also reveals his own costume, which is very silly, and I'll admit it's kind of fun to see all these villains back together and in one room. It's certainly not something I ever thought we'd see.
I demand.
It's Jigsaw.
Ah.
So, after we see that beautiful intro composed of awkwardly floating PNGs for the final time, Barry goes to the hospital to check on Iris. Soon enough, Eddie arrives as well and does the usual threatening villain routine.
It's not personal. I just want my life back.
Eddie wants to destroy this timeline so he can create one where he married Iris and had the family he always wanted with her. So, Barry and Eddie do a brief chase battle, and Eddie is somehow able to overpower Barry even though he's only had these powers for like 2 days, max. But backup arrives quickly on both sides, setting up the ultimate showdown. And if you had told me back in 2015 that this would be the final lineup for Team Flash, I would have said, what the fuck is a Chillblain? Whatever, it's time to fight. Whoa, what, whoa.
Wait, she can fly?
She can fly? So, both teams split off into one-on-one fights, and they get progressively less interesting as they go. First up is Nora versus Savitar, who just straight up tries to impale her the same way he tried to kill Iris in Season 3. But Nora pulls the old switcheroo, vibrating just the middle of her chest, and then she stabs him in the back with his own blade, and I think kills him? Is that all it takes? Yeah, that's a pretty normal reaction to murdering your father, I think. Next up is Cecile versus Godspeed, which sounds like the least interesting matchup imaginable, and it is. Godspeed makes a bunch of clones of himself, and they all attack Cecile one by one for no reason, and she just points her hands at them, and they fall over, gripping. Then she faces off against the real Godspeed, and by that I mean she does her mind thing, and he immediately dies. Wow. This guy was useless to the very end. Next up, it's Zoom versus Keown, Mark, and the CCPD. And if you look closely, you'll notice that Kramer is holding a gun from 26 years in the future. Not sure where she got that. Also, for whatever reason, when he sees Keown, Zoom doesn't think that she's Caitlin, even though those two had shared a very close relationship right up until he got pulled through time to now. Instead, he says this.
The goddess and her sidekick.
Wait, how does he know that she's calling herself a goddess now? Does he know who Keown is? How would he know that? Did Eddie know? Did Eddie tell him? How would Eddie know? Whatever, so Zoom throws some lightning at Keown, she throws it back at him, and I guess he also dies. Awesome. Great stuff. Thanks for all the help, Mark. Your presence is essential here.
Woo!
Hey.
And that just leaves the Reverse Flash, who shows up at Star Labs to go full Palpatine on Chester until Allegra teleports in and blasts him with light, which is, I think, only the second or third time this season that she's actually used her powers. So yeah, Chester appears to be dead, and if you've never seen a movie or TV show before, you might even believe that. But then, of course, he wakes up, the music swells, and he and Allegra engage in another kiss that just keeps going. And going, and going, and please cut. And finally, we're back with Barry and Eddie, who are now in the show's famous coffee shop. Eddie makes a lightning sword and threatens some baristas, and then Jay Garrick shows up out of nowhere to suck up Eddie's speed. Eddie decides that, of course, he needs more speed, more power, so he absorbs the energy of the speedsters he just resurrected, and they all just disappear, like they were never even there. And given what they accomplished this episode, I would argue that they weren't. But, as you may recall from Season 8, absorbing more and more force energy just causes a person to explode.
The only way to defeat him is to let him destroy himself, just like the last one.
But Keown steps in to point out that if Eddie dies, then the negative speed force will just choose another avatar, and this cycle they're in will repeat forever.
Nature is about more than balance. It's about coexistence.
Given all that these characters have been through, all they've learned, all they've lost, having this character say, maybe we shouldn't fight, doesn't feel like an answer to anything.
You need to change his point of view.
How?
I'm sorry, I just really can't believe that this is what it all built up to. Because Barry already learned that fighting is bad. He stopped fighting Thawne. That's why Thawne exploded. So, for the millionth time, Barry has taken a huge step backwards to learn the same lesson twice. And you could argue it's because Iris and the baby are in danger this time, but Iris is always in danger. She died last season. So, Barry travels into the negative Speed Force and embraces the spirit of pacifism. This is him changing his point of view. Okay, to be fair, he doesn't fight at all after that, even though Eddie starts beating the absolute piss out of him. But this is where the episode almost won me over, because a very specific parallel gets drawn that threatens to make the story interesting.
I always win, Flash.
Eddie is becoming the very thing he sacrificed himself to stop. That's a genuinely powerful idea, but his entire arc of returning from the dead, discovering who he is, turning evil, and then, spoilers, turning good again, happens so quickly that, like I said before, it feels like this could have happened to anyone. That cutaway to Reverse Flash is played like a payoff, but there's no actual setup. It's just a shallow callback that tries to squeeze emotional juice out of a bad scene by reminding you of a good one.
That's how we'll create a better world. Both sides working together.
Now, kill him!
So yeah, Eddie just stops being evil. He destroys the crystal, which makes me wonder if anyone could have just done that this whole time. And now he and Barry are the true avatars of their respective speed forces.
Doesn't mean we'll always see eye to eye.
I know.
But how is Eddie properly representing the negative Speed Force if he's not, like, negative? So yeah, with all of that very easily resolved, it's time to wrap things up. Barry gets back to the hospital just in time for Nora to be born. Yay! Chester discovers that he's a metahuman. Who cares? And the last remaining version of Harrison Wells appears to tell Keown that it's time for her to leave this mortal plane and ascend to heaven, I guess? Maybe she also gets to hang out in Forest Purgatory, I don't know. So Keown gets a big send-off where she says goodbye to her new friends, all of whom seem a lot more upset to see her go than they ever were about Caitlin dying, which is kind of weird. But wouldn't you know it, when Keown leaves, she just brings Caitlin back to life. No, I'm serious.
I never thought I'd see you again.
I know, but I'm home again.
Then why even kill her in the first place? I need some water. I feel like I'm gonna pass out.
What? Oh, whoa, I got you.
So, a week later, everyone is assembled for yet another party to celebrate Nora's birth, which is also being attended by future Nora, which seems like a not insignificant risk to that timeline everyone just spent 4 episodes trying to hold together, but nobody seems to care about that anymore. Anyway, Iris wins the Pulitzer, of course. Joe proposes to Cecile. Sure, their daughter Jenna is nowhere to be seen, of course, and we reach the final scene of the entire series. Now, before we close up, I do have to address the elephant in the room. Actually, it's not that important. It's more like the armadillo in the room. So, for many years, across many videos, I have been predicting that this show would end with an event similar to the comics, where Barry would sacrifice himself and essentially become the lightning bolt that strikes him in the pilot. I was wrong. That does not happen. So, how does The Flash end? Well, Barry gives a monologue to baby Nora about the world he wants to create for her. He talks about the power their family now holds and how they should share it, not hoard it. And then we see him running on the Ferris Air tarmac once again, sending out a bolt of lightning that will create new speedsters to carry on his legacy. So, in a sense, Barry does become the lightning bolt, but not for himself, for others. And those others are 3 people we've never heard of and have never seen before. Oh, sorry. Actually, one of them did appear in 1 episode of season 8, but she did not interact with Barry at all. Who are these people? How does Barry know about them? What are they gonna do with these powers? Why didn't they show up earlier in the season? The answer to all of these questions is, I have no idea. And then we get one final shot of Barry running through the city, which somehow looks significantly worse than any similar shot from up to 8 years beforehand, and the show finally ends. I have Mixed feelings. On one hand, I like the tone of this ending. It's uplifting and optimistic, which has always been the core of this character and this show. And the idea of shifting Barry's perspective from saving the world to building a better future for those who will come after him does show a level of maturity that feels like a good place to leave him. And sure, the season was messy and large chunks of it served absolutely no purpose, but if it's a question of the journey versus the destination, this certainly isn't the worst destination they could have reached. Every single time I've watched this episode, that final shot of Barry running has gotten me a little choked up. Grant Gustin sells his entire journey with that smile. It's a great final beat, but I'm not getting emotional because the story is provoking emotion. It's because I've been watching this show for about a third of my life and now it's over. So in terms of the episode as a whole, I feel nothing. I can't honestly say it disappointed me as far as expectations go, but it's still such a limp way to close this story. The inspiring note we end on is 3 randos are going to get super speed, and Barry's great. Was that really as deep as we could dig here? Also, what's with the whole we should share our power, not hoard it thing? Where did that come from? Has Barry ever acted selfishly about his speed like that? Like he was the only one who deserved it or something? The fact that I can't remember means it definitely didn't happen in season 9. So again, this is a payoff with no actual setup. And look, I don't want to wax poetic about what TV finales should do because every show is different. Every finale comes from a different place, a different context. But I think the best finales I've seen, or at least the ones I remember most fondly, are the ones that feel like an ending and a beginning. Definitely a conclusion to the story we've been watching, but not without the feeling that these characters, these people that we've come to know and love, will continue on, but in a fundamentally different way. I think this finale almost does that, it's certainly trying to, but the idea of balancing out these ancient cosmic forces or introducing gods that can reshape the fabric of nature, it just feels too big. The characters get lost, and just in general, from when Becky Sharp shows up until the final credits roll, it all feels so aimless.
Well, that was bad.
Still, I am glad I stuck with it to the end. I mean, in general, it's very hard for me to give up a TV show in the middle of watching it. A couple of years ago, I watched the entirety of House in like a month, and I didn't like any of it. Once I get deep enough into a show, I can't let go until I finish it all. I couldn't let go of The Flash either. But seriously, when this show started, it meant so much to me. Its whole universe did, so abandoning it never felt right. And now that we've reached the end, I can confidently say that The Flash died the way it lived, being not as good as season 1. Oh, hey, sorry, we're back. Okay. So yeah, that's The Flash season 9. That's about it. I don't have too much more to say here, but I did want to do a little bit of sort of personal reflection here just because this video is such a significant milestone for me. I mean, I've been making videos in this loosely defined series for like 8 years now, which is insane because for essentially my entire adult life, the question of what is the next Flash video going to be has been very present, you know, just every minute I've been awake. And so it's almost disconcerting to be looking ahead to what I want to do next and not have that as a thing I'll have to do. And I think at times when I have felt this kind of creative insecurity, I've wanted to emulate people who I have liked for a long time because like, oh hey, what they're doing works and what I'm doing sucks. And it's only very recently, primarily with the production of this video, that I have found a real comfort and a confidence in what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. I guess I kind of feel like I'm enough, which has been a general problem for me, but that's for my therapist to figure out. Actually, earlier this year, around the time where I was finishing writing this, I was at a premiere for a movie that James actually worked on, Humane, directed by Caitlin Cronenberg. Check it out, Canadian. And as I was leaving, a theater employee came over to me and was like, oh, hey, you're Ross, right? Like, I saw you come in. I've been watching your videos since I was a kid, and I was feeling really insecure at that time, especially about writing this video. So getting that real, tangible evidence that what I'm doing here is actually creating fascinating connections with people, like, I mean, it made my night better, obviously. It's such a cool thing to happen ever, anywhere. But it also gave me a dose of inspiration I really needed. So yeah, in terms of a final note, I guess I just want to express my extreme and undying gratitude to everyone who's been watching. Whether this is your first video of mine or whether you've been watching from the beginning, I'm a very lucky person in general, I would say, but I never thought I would get this far on here, and yeah, just thank you so much for getting me here. In every possible sense, I could not do it without you, so like and subscribe. Sorry. I'm also very grateful to the cast and crew of The Flash for all 9 years, because I would not be here without you guys either. And yeah, that's about it. I don't think there's anything else to... Oh, shit. I have to feed Grant.
Ross, please. I'm sorry I didn't ring the bell. I'm sorry. I've reconsidered. I'll be in the final Flash video, okay? I'll do it. Just please let me out of here. No, I can't eat any more butter.